Out of the gates and ready to go. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow is underway. Thursday edition is here. Big show planned, jam-packed. Trey Wallace joins us coming up in 20 minutes. A lot to discuss across the college football landscape and much more. Michael McHenry, the Fort, joins us with Major League Baseball news and notes and opinions. That's coming up later this hour as well. Armando Salguero is back. He'll be in on tomorrow's show, and he joins us to talk NFL headlines, which includes DeAndre Hopkins, Saquon Barkley, and Bill Belichick. A lot to get into there. Plus, Chad, we will be joined by Ramon Diaz Jr. The discussion all week and all weekend was about Northwestern football. Former Northwestern player Ramon Diaz Jr. has detailed how he was hazed and the toxic culture within the program whenever he played from 2005 to 2008. And he will join us, and we'll be able to have that discussion in hour number 3. Chad, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. He claims that it caused post-traumatic stress disorder with him playing in the program. So we'll talk to him. And to my knowledge, Hutton, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ramon Diaz Jr. is the only current or former player that is on record with something negative to say. Plenty of current and former players have stuck up for their coach,
right,
saying everything was fine. And, of course, the current players released that statement and that letter to everyone. But I think Ramon Diaz Jr. is the only player that's on record with his name attached to it talking about these issues. So great job by our team setting this up, getting him on the show. I got a lot of questions for him. I got a lot of questions about what happened then, what he said after. Did he say anything? What else did he see with other players? There's a lot of claims.
And why now?
The Daily Northwestern is after it, too, where they've got people not on the record, but former black players, a black member of the staff, I think an assistant coach that didn't put their name with it, but anonymously talked about kind of a racist vibe around the program. Hutton, it strikes me a lot of Iowa. The claims made against Kirk Ferentz. It's a lot of the same stuff.
It's easy to draw those similarities.
Cut your hair, you're not in the hood anymore. A lot of statements like that being made to African-American players. That's the claim coming down with Northwestern, but it does seem very similar and not all that shocking given the racial dynamics of those programs, which are majority white programs when you look at Northwestern and Iowa. So a lot of different layers of this story to get into, not just the hazing allegations, but the racism allegations. We'll talk to Ramon Diaz Jr. coming up. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, same here. A great discussion there with details of behind the scenes with the culture there at Northwestern. Chad, time for Scorched Earth here on Hot Mic, the top headlines today. And we start with Rory McIlroy. And speaking of Scorched Earth, that's what he would like to do to the Live Golf and the Tour funded by the Saudi-backed public fund, and he has doubled down on that yet again, tripled, quadrupled, however you want to put it. There's a report that's out, and it was from a document that was released through what we were seeing and hearing from the U.S. Senate hearings involving this merger between Live Golf and the PGA Tour, where there was an initial pitch back in April about Rory and Tiger having the ability to own a live team that was quickly shot down by the PGA Tour in those talks. They said, no, that's not going to happen. But Rory was then responding to this because he finished his first round at the Scottish Open and says, if Live Golf was the last place to play golf on earth, I would retire. That's how I feel about it. I'd play the majors, but I'd be pretty comfortable. That from Rory, who still is crushing it at the majors. He's right there in contention and has been a vocal supporter and loyal player for the PGA Tour, despite what we saw at the top and a handful of the board members with the PGA Tour. What do you make of this? Because the vibe is this is going to happen. It's a question of not if, but when, because all of the Saudi money in this and how they've tried to put money into other sports or racing teams, F1 and elsewhere, no, they've never been shot down or not allowed to do so. And the idea is it's going to happen. It's just language now with attorneys.
Yeah, I talked about this, I think, yesterday or maybe the day before about, is someone really going to put their money where their mouth is on this? We talked about Randall Stevenson, I think was the guy's name, the former AT&T,
Yes.
AT&T chairman, CEO, that resigned because of this merger
From the
with
board.
Liv,
Yep.
because he's got moral issues with it. And I said, well, good for him. He's actually standing on something and saying, yeah, I'm not going to deal with it. And then I posed the question, who's going to be the first PGA Tour professional that spoke out against Liv so vehemently that's going to now retire or just step away and say, I'm not going to be involved with this? And I'm glad that Rory is saying this. I believe that he believes it. I think, Hutton, we're also dealing with semantics in this because he's saying, well, if Liv is the last tour on earth, then I'll just retire and I'm going to be comfortable. Well, you're not going to ever be playing technically for Liv because the value and the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia understands this. The value of the brand is PGA, but you are working for the Saudi Public Investment Fund.
Yeah, they bought golf.
Yes, they bought into it. Now, they're not a majority owner, but they are one of the owners. They are a stakeholder in it. Well, so they are one of the bosses of the league now. So,
but they still are, based on the details reading through it. Like, you still have to go through the governor of the Public Investment Fund.
Oh yeah, no,
to get things approved. So technically, even though there's not majority,
they're one of the
they have the veto power.
They're one of the people that make decisions for PGA Tour. So I get what he's saying. I like that he's so principled about it. But you already are on Liv. It's just now called PGA. They bought into it and merged. So now Liv is PGA. They want to be PGA. They wanted that from the beginning. They started Liv so they could force PGA's hand to have a seat at the table. Well, they've got that now. So this group is one of your bosses. And oh, by the way, you're meeting with them in Dubai in November. You know, they've golfed in pro-ams together. So
they hung out, and I think the first meeting was at Formula One.
I appreciate Rory McIlroy standing on principle and all this, but what we're talking about now is semantics because he is on Liv. It's just Liv is now called PGA, and the guys who ran Liv are now part of the group running PGA. That simple.
Chad, the ESPYs last night, we knew this going in, that the U.S. women's national team was receiving the Arthur Ashe Courage Award. ESPN is going to ESPN, and we're not watching the ESPYs. So if the ratings are down and the ESPYs suck, why pay attention to an award that ESPN is handing out on behalf of the U.S. women's national team? And last night was a great case in point, where they're taking Will Cain's comments about equal pay out of context. We'll play that audio later. They are pointing to equal pay for both the women's and men's national teams and celebrating them as heroes and courageous, even though they're currently in a lawsuit against their own employer, against their own national team. And here we are with the ESPYs yet again making the headlines based on the Courage Award, which we've seen over the years be controversial.
Are we going to get into the audio that was twisted?
We've got that later, yeah.
Okay, coming up later?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll talk more about this later. I am being completely honest right now. I didn't know the ESPYs were on last night. I completely forgot about it until this morning. I knew the story about the U.S. women's national team. I had read a tweet about Pat McAfee doing something. I think he gave the opening monologue. I haven't gone back and watched any of it.
Demar Hamlin.
And I think Demar Hamlin going to be a part of. LeBron James gave a speech at some point. Patrick Mahomes was on stage. I saw all these things on Twitter. I've not watched a second of the broadcast. And I've talked about this before, but that's a real statement that I didn't care. I didn't know much about it. I mean, this was for years. When you go back to that Jim Valvano speech, that's iconic. And this was an annual event. I mean, Hutton, you and I hosted a local radio show in Nashville for years, and this was required viewing. You watched the ESPYs, and you spent the first 30 minutes of your show the next day reacting to the ESPYs because the sporting community was watching the ESPYs. So you better be prepared to talk about it. I feel no urge or desire to talk about it now because I don't think the sporting public cares or watched it, quite frankly. The other issue that I have is apparently DirecTV is in dispute with ABC, so I don't get ABC when it was on. When I saw that, I tried to go back and replay it. Didn't get that either. But I wouldn't have cared either way. And isn't that a big statement about where this award show has fallen in the sports world?
Yeah, it's an afterthought.
Yeah.
It's an afterthought.
Now, what they did with Will Cain's thing is very dishonest.
Yes.
And we'll get into that later.
Chad, Saquon Barkley, Diana Rossini says that it could definitely happen that he holds out going into the regular season. The Giants will play the Cowboys in week 1. The deadline for Barkley to sign the franchise tag, which is tendered at $10.1 million for this upcoming season, and once he signs his name, it's fully guaranteed. He has said repeatedly he's not going to play for the franchise tag. The Giants have been in contract negotiations with him. The reports are they offered him around $14 million on average annually. That would put him right behind Christian McCaffrey for the highest paid. But if he doesn't sign by Monday's deadline, we could see him actually hold out, and it's a huge mistake. I would take the $10 million guaranteed, especially for that position, and make sure that I'm covered. He's had an injury history. Josh Jacobs has talked about doing this with the Raiders out in Vegas. There's just not enough leverage at the position. And while he's at the top of his game right now, where he was 4th in rushing yards and had 50 or 60 catches out of the backfield with Daniel Jones there, and they've got a solid coaching staff surrounding him, and it's now just not on him to do everything when he's available. I don't blame the Giants for going about the contract discussions the way they did with Daniel Jones versus the top running back and the former number 2 overall pick in Barkley. I don't blame Barkley for wanting to be paid more, but if I'm guaranteed $10 million just by signing the paper, I'm doing it by Monday's deadline.
Yeah, his leverage is not as strong as it probably should be based on his importance to that team.
Sure.
We had Eddie George in studio. He mentioned the word leverage 3 or 4 times and what his advice would be to current running backs in the NFL. And the bottom line is that these guys just don't have the leverage they once held at that position because it is seen as something that's very replaceable. Now, with Saquon Barkley, I don't think he's that replaceable for what he does for the Giants currently. It's not like you can go pluck anyone out of thin air and say, well, we'll pay a guy nothing or the rookie minimum, and he's going to be Saquon Barkley. No, he's one of those special running backs in the league that is different. So maybe he gets more of what he wants in this thing, but I don't see it. I don't see a team bending to the will of any running back in 2023 NFL.
If not, they'll just invest in another one, another young player that they can run into the ground at a much cheaper rate instead of investing in a player that recently has an injury history but came back last year. And when he was running and gunning, it was phenomenal. They were really good when all of the cylinders were firing for the New York Giants. They need him. The question is he going to be there for training camp or possibly week 1 instead of just taking the $10 million, cashing that into the bank, and performing the way he did a year ago, and then he gets the big money somewhere else, unless the Giants want to tag him again, and that's where the leverage lies. It's with the team, not the position. John Morant and his attorneys, they held a hearing about the civil lawsuit that is ongoing that dates back to the incident where Morant and one of his friends, Devontae Pack, were and have been alleged to have punched Joshua Holloway. At the time, Holloway was 17 years old, and we've referenced this quite a bit when going back through the timeline of Morant. They've been approved through a motion where he can now argue, his legal team can argue in this civil case, self-defense. And they had some other motions earlier. Now it's self-defense, and the judge said, yeah, you can do that. You can make that case, and we'll see where we take it from here. I'm intrigued by it because one side is saying one thing. You have Holloway and another family member, I believe, that is describing things a different way, including Morant coming back out of the home and having the gun in his shorts and almost like showing it off casually after the alleged punch took place. Chad, the details were that Morant's dad was kind of egging them on a bit, and especially Holloway, saying, hey, you got Ja here, you got to take him.
Go after him.
Take him to the rim. Go after him. And that got physical. and it led to this, which is now in civil court.
Yeah, and there's a law in Tennessee called the Stand Your Ground law, and this is what they're citing as what they're going to say it should be dismissed, the civil lawsuit, because of the Stand Your Ground law, and that John Morant was simply standing his ground. That's a very difficult argument when only one person was punched, and to my knowledge, only one person had a weapon and showed the weapon. I could totally buy self-defense if another punch was thrown and or someone was threatening you with a weapon or showed off a weapon, and then you went and showed off your weapon in response, right? Then, okay, now I get where this is going, but everything that we know that's been alleged so far shows John Morant, to me, as the aggressor in this situation. So, look, I'm sure he's got good lawyers. We don't know the full story. More of it may come out, but everything that Holloway has said in this civil lawsuit, if it's not all being refuted by John Morant, I don't know how they're completely getting out of this.
So, but the other part of it, correct me if I'm wrong, is Holloway also made a threat about coming back, like going home and then coming back with a gun, right?
Again, but if he doesn't have a gun on him, I think that's still difficult to say. I was just defending myself from a guy who was not armed when I brought a weapon to this fist fight. That, oh, by the way, I'm the one throwing fisticuffs.
Right.
He didn't punch me. That's tough.
There'll be further details.
Tough claim.
We'll dive into those as soon as they come out through the civil case. Trey Wallace joins us next. A lot to discuss, including Ed Orgeron and Northwestern.
Pat Fitzgerald has been fired. Pat Fitzgerald, the beleaguered, the weirdo, I guess, or his weird players, has been fired by Northwestern University. And the Northwestern children, the players, are not happy about it. They are not taking it well. Well, I ask you, Northwestern players. In fact, I just put out a video to Northwestern players that are mad. And they're mad because, well, the old coach. The old coach got blank canned because, well, the players decided it was a good idea to get naked, do naked crawls, naked claps, naked soap up themselves in front of the shower and make players run through because the players of Northwestern really are perverted. I mean, I'll never understand it. Now, I got guys saying, well, Bobby Knight, you guys hazed just in a different way, yelling and screaming. Yeah, you're right. We did. Tough. You don't like it? So what? But we never did the nudity thing. We never did the sexual assault thing. We never did the stuff, hey, we're going to slap you and dry hump you. At some point, the players, don't you agree, the players of Northwestern got to look themselves in the mirror and say, you know what? This is kind of on us. You know what? We caused a lot of this. You know what? We shouldn't have done that. Now, every time I see a Northwestern player from now on, I'm like, yeah, you're a weirdo. Used to be every time I saw a Northwestern player, I'd be like, man, you're a tough dude. You played for a tough coach, played for a high-end academic institution. I'd hire you in a second. Now I'm like, yeah, you got a bunch of weirdos running around there. Now I'm like, what in the hell are you doing there in the locker room at Northwestern? And I told you yesterday that this firing was coming because of this one reason. When you have to have outside people monitor your locker room because your players are perverts, because your coach allows it, because it's a culture of somehow, some way naked hazing. And no one's denying the hazing, by the way. So it's not like I'm speaking out of school. Sure, Fitzgerald, Fitz, whatever, is a great dude. Sure, he is the face of Northwestern. I would argue he's the most important figure in the history of Northwestern athletics. Nobody's not saying good dude. But he did what a lot of dumb meat-headed coaches do. He got on his little mount. He's got his little pillar. He's got his little kingdom. And on top of the kingdom is him. And he got to thinking he was untouchable because no coach with any common sense would allow that in this day and age. I don't know what they were doing back when Bear Bryant was having guys out at camp. I don't know what they were doing when Kay first started. I don't know what they were doing at Indiana when Knight first started. I only know what I've been involved in, and it's never involved dry humping other men or nudity. Just saying. In the locker room. naked, on my team. Never. Anywhere, actually, but never. Used to give you a ball tap once in a while out in public just to say hello. But I got to tell you, it's just the weirdest thing. And none of these players are taking any accountability. You know what they're doing? They're doing the Biden strategy. This went from the Bob Knight strategy of round up all the players, ex-players, whoever, and talk great things about this strong man. Look at his chin. Yeah, that's what they do.
Sixth and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Hot Mike with Honey Withrow rolls on. Our goal to make the next 2 hours plus fly by for you on your workday on this Thursday. And if you're viewing us, you can on YouTube. Hope you'll subscribe to the OutKick channel. You can join Chad in the chat. And you can also go to OutKick.com and check out great content from our next guest. Trey Wallace joins us, covers all things college football for OutKick. And the Trey Wallace podcast available now at the site. Trey, hope things are well.
Yeah, guys. Hope everything's well in Nashville. Y'all are getting ready for a party next week. And, man, it should be a lot of people in town starting on Monday. Actually, start on Sunday. And then I forgot there was a darn concert going on, I think, Saturday night at Nissan Stadium. So I'm trying to decide when I'm actually going to head into town.
It's Beyonce at Nissan Stadium Saturday and Blink 182 at Bridgestone Arena Sunday night. Both tickets are expensive.
Okay, Blink 182 then Sunday night.
Yep.
Sunday night's the plan then. Okay, all right, I'll take it.
There'll be a crowd of people on Sunday night too, Trey. Just get ready.
Yeah.
The first headline, the commissioner, Greg Sankey of the SEC, is extended on his contract through 2028. This is a formality. Like, they could extend him as long as he wanted to contractually based on the job he's done and the power he holds across college athletics.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, they could have put year 2031 in there if they wanted to. I mean, it really did not matter. Greg Sankey has been at the forefront of what we have seen in college football, whether that be the playoffs, whether that be in trying to navigate, NIL, building and trying to build one of the biggest and baddest leagues in college football right there with the Big Ten. And, I go back and look what he did, years ago. I say years ago now with Texas and Oklahoma when they joined the conference. It set things off. And for Greg Sankey right now and the job that he is doing, Jonathan, I think that this is a formality. Yes, Greg Sankey is going to hang around until he is done. And he wants until he look. Another thing too is, I was texting with somebody a minute ago about this. Like, he could serve, in any capacity when it comes to the new college football playoff format and still be involved in an everyday role with the Southeastern Conference. And I think that is one of the big things that stands out to Sankey is that, and I think you guys would both agree with me here, I think his role changes within college football drastically over the next 5 to 8 to 10 years. And so, look, I don't look at the number on the year that he's there at 2028. I just think this is setting up for more for Sankey down the road.
He's only 58 too. There's no telling over the next decade what he's done and the leadership that he will possess, that those across this college landscape will follow.
Well, and also the other thing too, guys, is to remember, I mean, there's going to be more expansion in the SEC, in the Big Ten. We'll see what the ACC decides to do, or if teams decide to get out of that. I would expect in the next 5 years, we're going to hear expansion talk again. I think more teams are going to be in the fold, and he's going to be at the forefront of that with the Southeastern Conference. And when it comes to the Big Ten, Okay, they're bringing in a new commissioner. They're trying to figure out how they're going to, roll out USC and UCLA. I think, in my personal opinion, probably the third best commissioner, probably second best right now, because we don't know about Tony Petitri up at the Big Ten. I think Brett Yormark has done a really good job with the Big 12. So Greg Sankey deserved any kind of money that he's getting on top of this right now, and he'll be around for a very long time.
Trey, a story out there talking about leading the way in college football, or at least attempting to. Greg Sankey could be in that position. Collectives in the future could be in that position. And there are 7 NIL collectives that have formed the entity known as the Collective Association. Tennessee, Georgia, Michigan, Ole Miss, just to name a few of these. They're trying to take a leadership role here, Trey, and it seems to me like they're also trying to form the outline of a rule book of how these collectives should operate and have a straightforward system for every program competing at the highest level to do things on the up and up and to make sure that kids are signing into something that's legit when they do it. I think this is a good story for the future of college sports if they can figure it out. At least someone's taking the initiative to do so.
Yeah, I think it's great that this thing is started off. I was talking with my buddy NIL Pete Schoenthal, who runs Alliance. We were discussing many things about the way NIL was going to go over the next number of years, and I think the way that we look at it right now, when it comes to what these collectives are getting together, and they're trying to form an outline of what NIL can and will look like over the next 5 to 10 years. Right now, it's I don't like the term wild west, but you've got different states with different rules, and you've got collectives with different rules, and look, they're trying to find the narrow path to where everybody's doing the same thing. It's just fundraising and whatnot can be different on how each collective goes. I think them forming, quote, association, I think it helps it. Look, they're not going to be giving away trade secrets about what they're doing when it comes to each university, but they are going to be helping each other when it comes to, if collectives, and here's the biggest thing I take away, if collectives want to be around in 5 to 10 years, you've got to figure out a way to make this thing stable. You've got to figure out a way that these players know what they're getting into, these coaches know what they're getting into, and also, if we do get to the part where Congress is going to get involved, this collective association is trying to lay the groundwork in terms of what type of regulations can there be when it comes to the federal part of this. So I agree. I think it's a good thing for college football. I think there are so many questions out there, Chad, right now concerning where we are in the NIL world. And look, they're trying to answer these questions. But I think that forming a committee, getting together, sharing some notes on how you got to this point, or how you're fundraising, in a sense, not giving away numbers, but how you're doing this, and this. I think it only betters college football. I think it only helps them in a sense of how to navigate this thing going forward, because we cannot continue doing what we're doing right now with NIL, because as we've seen recently, there are some collectives out there, they're running out of money in a sense of, well, they spent so much on the 2022 class, they don't have enough for the 23 class, or they don't, they're spending so much on the 23 class, they don't know what the 24-25 class looks like. So what I'm getting at is that you have to figure out that boundary, that line, when it comes to revenue. And I think this is a great way, just one of the ways that this association can help that.
Yeah, and the Jaden Rashada story at Florida is a classic example. The other collectives don't want to see those headlines because it makes them look like used car salesmen and not on the up and up. And you get one bad headline like that, and they all look bad. And just reading through the language, some of this is making sure that everything they do is buttoned up. That if they're going to offer a contract to a kid, they can fulfill the contract, and it can work out for both the collective and the kid. I think that's important. Part of this if they're going to have a better standing with everyone.
Well,
right?
the Jaden Rashada thing, guys, I mean, we all remember it. I mean, and I'll break it down real fast for you and how it went down. They promised Jaden Rashada money. The booster pulled back at the last minute and said, wait a minute, I'm not going to get a return on this. Why am I putting in so much money for this kid? So they pulled back on the money that was offered. Jaden did not sign with Florida. There was a bunch of different hands in the pot on who's putting the contract together and what collective is doing this, and this. And as we have seen now at Florida, they've changed collectives. They've tried to rebrand under a new name with new people. So that was a screw up that makes all collectives look bad at the same time. So I don't suspect you're going to see anything like the Jaden Rashada thing ever again.
Trey, biggest story in college sports is what's going on at Northwestern. You wrote at OutKick.com. You can read it right now that the decision by Northwestern to retain the assistant coaches could be really good news for Pat Fitzgerald and now the legal fight that begins for him to get his buyout money.
I don't understand it. And I've spoken with coaches all around college football. And the coaches that I spoke with were flabbergasted because, their main point to me was, well, wait a minute. If I was involved in something, if I knew about something, the head coach is damn well sure going to know about it. But you're telling me I get to keep my job? A lot of it doesn't make sense. This is great for Pat Fitzgerald. The fact that Northwestern said, and they didn't say this, but I'm paraphrasing, and this is what I've heard from folks. Man, we're 3 weeks away from the start of fall camp. How in the world do we get rid of an entire staff and be able to put a season together? They did not fire these assistant coaches because they knew fall camp was around the corner and they knew that they had to prepare for the 2023 season. If they'd have gotten rid of every assistant coach that they thought knew about it or should have known about it, wouldn't have a coaching staff. We're in a different situation. This is not like John L. Smith coming in for a year at Arkansas and is going to be the interim coach, but all the assistants stay. It feels like Northwestern is just going to go this, interim route for this season. And then they're going to, in my opinion, after the season's over, a lot of these assistant coaches, whether they knew or not, and it's an unfortunate situation for some of these guys going from assistant coach all the way down to a quality control or quality assistant coach. It's unfortunate because they're going to be let go. And I think if this would have happened in May or early June, maybe there's something different that would have happened with these assistant coaches. But you can't tell me. That's the biggest thing that stands out. You can't tell me that you're going to fire Pat Fitzgerald. And I'm not saying I don't disagree with what happened with Pat Fitzgerald. But you can't tell me that and then turn around and keep the assistant coaches that I promise you, if there was something going on at Northwestern, they know about it. Assistant coaches know more about their players than the head coach does. And it's because they're with them, 14, 15 hours a day in meeting rooms, on the practice field. They're texting their players at night to see, hey, how you doing? How's that breakup going with your girlfriend? Is everything okay? They're more involved. And that's nothing against Pat Fitzgerald or a head coach. He just can't be involved in the personal lives of 100 players. So I feel like that's where Northwestern kind of screwed themselves in this situation because if Pat Fitzgerald, lawyer's smart, which I got a feeling he really is, they're going to come back and say, well, wait a minute, you fired me. You said that the evidence pointed that I didn't really know what was going on or I couldn't have. But you're telling me that you kept the rest of the assistant coaches on staff and everybody else involved? It's such a messy situation right now that I would suspect that Northwestern's going to have a pretty nice settlement for Pat Fitzgerald unless they just have some evidence that we haven't heard of yet.
Final minute here, Trey, and it took only a minute or so, it felt like, for the short-lived report that Ed Orgeron and Northwestern could be a thing. I wanted that to live a little bit longer than it did. I know Feldman has said that Orgeron has shot this down, say he has no interest, and that Northwestern hasn't even reached out. But can you imagine Ed O in the Big Ten at Northwestern?
Can you imagine him in Evanston, Illinois, and how that would have gone? The opening meeting with the players and
with that university,
I
too.
mean, it's like a plot to
Going to booster
Crocodile
events.
Dundee, when he's just out of
Right.
place in Chicago. It'd be amazing to watch.
Hey guys, we're having a crawfish bowl today.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. What's crawfish? Okay, it's like it's one of those things. But yeah, look, it was short lived. It would have been fun. Everybody was making pictures, and then all of a sudden, what everybody should have done is just picked up the phone to Ed Orgeron and said, "Hey man, you actually interested in this job? Oh, you're not. Okay, good. Then we don't have to deal with this nonsense for 2.5 hours." So,
Oil and water.
It's college athletics, guys.
Yeah, I mean,
Just the idea of Edo pitching academics to a kid in the living room and recruiting. That is funny to me. I don't know that he's ever done that. I mean, has he ever gone in and talked about the biology department at a school that he's been at? But now he's like, thinking about him and his pitch in the world of academia and what the degree you can get at Northwestern is hilarious to me.
God bless Coach O. I bet he doesn't know where half these departments are on these campuses. So,
not.
it is what it is. That's why, look, we love Coach O.
Yes.
He's crazy. That's how he is. But man, Northwestern, come on, give me something better than that. If I want Coach O back, give me something in the South. That's how I'll take it.
When was the last time 100,000 people showed up to watch a chemistry experiment? Would be what he would claim. That's
he
great
would
line
say
from the
that, but
movie
we
The
wouldn't
Program.
understand him as he said
No,
it.
well,
right?
we'd understand about 2 words.
Trey, appreciate you. We look forward to checking out the Trey Wallace podcast each and every week. You can find that at OutKick.com and all of Trey's great work covering college football. He'll be here in Nashville with us covering SEC Media Days next week. Appreciate it, Trey. Michael McHenry is next. A lot to discuss with what Rob Manfred said at the All-Star game.
What is your primary complaint?
When people pop their knuckles.
Primary complaint is chewing with your mouth open. Yuck.
I would say when you're getting off an airplane and people in the back try and sprint to the front, especially like late at night, like you don't have a connecting flight, just wait like everybody else. I'd say that's fine.
Small portions, big bill. Yeah, if the quality is good, it's okay. But if they're small portions and I got a big fat bill, not a thing,
Sun Country Airlines canceling our flight less than 8 hours before we're supposed to leave.
I've never even heard of Sun Country Airlines in my life.
Velcro.
Velcro? Why? What about it?
The sound.
Oh, like nails on a chalkboard for you.
I'm a kindergarten teacher, and to hear that Velcro.
Time to teach them how to tie their shoes.
When they don't cross the road when no cars are driving.
They're just waiting for the light.
Yeah, like a normal person.
Yeah, you got to break the rules a little
We're
bit.
right from New York City. We know how to walk.
Really upset. Ben Jones is no longer with the Titans, but more importantly, I'm upset the Titans didn't draft a wide receiver in the top 2 rounds. We need receivers, guys. Come on, tighten up.
So what do you think about Will Levis? Was that a good move or a bad move?
Ooh, that's a tough call. Time will tell. But I think we needed a receiver more.
Smack their gum, chew with their mouth open and smack their gum.
Okay.
That with chips and everything else, yeah.
Liars.
Liars. Okay. Has anyone lied to you recently?
No.
Have you lied?
Always.
One of the biggest pet peeves is not knowing your manners. Like, not having respect or thank you, sir, ma'am.
My biggest pet peeve is when you don't push your chair in after you leave a table. That's my biggest pet peeve. Really is.
So like when people want to speak to you and they're like you to me, but they start walking out of the other room into different rooms and they keep talking like, I am supposed to understand. I can't hardly understand people when their back is turned to me, when they're not talking right at me. So when you're getting into different rooms and you keep talking like, yeah, blah, 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 it must be my dog talking to me.
There's a crane over every building. There's a truck.
There's a whole something.
Yeah.
So let's get the streets fixed and get those things done. Time's wasted. Let's go.
A dirty house.
Dirty house. Like, are you a shoes off at the front door kind of guy?
Off front, yes, ma'am.
I hate it when centre backs don't bat the odd one. You know, when the centre backs go up to try and catch the ball all the time, they should back the odd one.
You know, siblings are pet peeves, you know, to be honest with you. Just looking at him, he's a pet peeve.
I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I like to get along with others. I kind of leave people in their place. When people don't follow the social construct, it really upsets me. Example, when you stand up on an airplane, right, when it lands, and then try to push past people down the line. You know what orders you're supposed to go in. That's the part of the social contract. When you're grocery shopping and you have your cart and you don't take it back to the cart delivery spot, but you just leave it by there beside the parking spot, taking up someone else's spot, violating the social contract. Do what you're supposed to. Yeah, do your civic duty. Follow through with what your parents told you to do.
Glad you're with us for Hot Mike with Hutt and Withrow here on the OutKick Network, which you can find by listening to this great radio station, or you can also head over to YouTube. Search out OutKick, hit that subscribe button, pound the like button, the thumbs up.
Smash it. Smash that like button every time.
And hit the reminder when we go live each and every day, 3 o'clock Eastern, here across the network. And you can check out all the shows by doing that on the YouTube channel for OutKick. Michael McHenry joins us, Major League Baseball analyst, our MLB analyst here on the show, part of the Pirates broadcast team as well. Fort, good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you guys. And I just broke my like button for you guys.
That's
it won't even
perfect.
work.
Thank you.
I use it so much.
That's
Miss you, Hutt, Chad. Thank you for the recommendations and happy to be here.
You crushed it, man. Thank you for sitting in.
Food That Built America. You checked it out. Did you like it? What was the review?
I like it so far. I kind of didn't want to stop. It was like 2 a.m. I got to go to bed. I mean, this is good stuff.
You'll also
So I
gain
appreciate
some
it.
weight watching it because every single brand
by
you
watching.
see on there, you're like, I got to go out the next day and get me an original chicken sandwich or whatever it is that they're showing on it. It makes you
All I
want it
wanted
every time.
was a Wendy's hamburger.
Yeah.
All I wanted. They kept saying it. I was like, oh my gosh. My mouth was watering.
It works. Power of suggestion.
Michael, did you take the comments made by Rob Manfred that they're considering Atlanta for the 2025 All-Star game, and that they named others? They're considering Chicago and Baltimore and Toronto as well. But just by Manfred mentioning that, knowing that the game was removed from Georgia based on the updated and changed voting laws that were enacted at the time, the fact that they're being considered for 2025, I took that to mean they're going to get the All-Star game in 2025. I don't know if you felt the same way.
I think it's a lot of backpedaling. I think he knows he made a mistake. He jumped to some conclusions and didn't maybe research enough to understand what was going on in Georgia. There's two sides to every story. He needed to understand that. Send it to Coors Field. I love Coors. They did a great job hosting, but you lost out on a great city in Atlanta. Everything's brand new, but they got a little bit of payback when they won the World Series. I thought that was outstanding. And the ball never lies is a statement I used to say when I used to play 21, the game outside, and the ball never lied right there. The ball told you exactly what should have been and should have had happen. They didn't do it that way. And honestly, guys, I take Rob Manfred with a grain of salt. So yes, he put some really good statements out there. He said the right thing. He did the politically correct thing, which he doesn't like politics. That's what he said about the A's and the A's stadium. But the reality of it is here, if you look underneath the line thing, he says, we want to get back to places that haven't had the All-Star game in a long time. And he kept referring back to Wrigley Field. So I don't think he's going to give it to Atlanta. I think he's going to throw it to Wrigley and say, hey, they haven't had it for so long. And then you have 2026 already taken, 2024 already taken. So maybe 2027 you see it go back to Atlanta.
Yeah, Rob Manfred doesn't like politics, but he does like, and he is okay with caving to one side politically if there's someone's mad about something. He also comes back and says, and you said you take everything with a grain of salt on this, Michael, but talking about the Oakland A's, so that's going to be one of his biggest disappointments of his time as commissioner, that he could not keep the A's in Oakland. I hear that, though, Michael, and I think a year from now or 2 years from now, he's going to be bragging about being the commissioner that brought Major League Baseball to Vegas when it's a success also. So that he's talking out of both sides of his mouth here. And once again, he's completely blaming the political structure in the city of Oakland for everything that went wrong and nothing to do with ownership with the A's.
You know, guys, I hear that little violin playing. You know, it's just it's whining. It's pitiful that he said this because it's not like the Oakland A's have changed over the last 2 decades. They've been a small market team. They haven't been drawing well. The stadium's been falling apart. I haven't played there in over a decade, and it wasn't in good shape then. There was mold issues. There was problem with seats falling apart then, and they've just let it go. They kind of showed their hand of what they were trying to do. They wanted to leave because there was more money, more opportunity in Vegas. And they knew that was right there for the grasp. So they were not, in my humble opinion, they had no intention to stay in Oakland. They didn't care about the fans. They didn't care about the city because politically they were trying to figure this out. And if Major League Baseball wanted to figure it out, they could push forward. Maybe they could do a split ownership with the fans, MLB, and those guys that own the team in Oakland. But they didn't want to do that. They wanted to get out of there. They wanted that huge plot of land where they could do similar to what the Braves have done, have the Battery, have residential, have retail, have all those things so you can make more money. If they did that in Oakland, guys, I want you to think about it. That city's fallen apart. It has not been maybe structured very well. There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of crime. It's in a bad area. If they did that for that city, what would it have done? All the jobs it would have brought, all the people that would have shown up, maybe that haven't gone in years because they're scared to go into Oakland. Now they start going. That would have been remarkable for that city and for the people there.
Yeah, I mean, the Warriors even went across the bay to build that new arena. And from Manfred's standpoint, I think he's saying he could do both because they're talking expansion after the A's move and with the Rays. And if they could get the A's to stay in Oakland, Las Vegas would have been the expansion city with a new owner.
Correct. And why not? I mean, baseball's thriving. I mean, I believe I sent Davey a graphic that showed how much baseball is growing over the last year or two. It's been remarkable. We've talked so much about the sports are dying. This is dying. The reality of it is it continues to grow. And this is one of the biggest years ever. I know the All-Star game numbers were down, but everything else has been flying up. They could do a lot of different things. They could go into Nashville. They could go into Charlotte. They expand these divisions and make it, you know, a little bit better for guys that are fighting to get to the big leagues because we see great talent coming to the big leagues. There's a lot of guys in AAA that have big league talent that just kind of fester there for a while. Then you get them at 24, 25. We've seen what these young guys can do in De La Cruz and Corbin Carroll and some of these guys that get up early and show their ability, show their talent, and you get them for so much longer. I think that's really important. So, yeah, why not expand the game? I'd love to see them also head back up into Canada, get another team in Canada, maybe bring back the Expos. That would be really neat. Trying to go international, why not go all in? Have a team in Vegas, have a team in Oakland. If they can't figure it out, make them pay penalties, make them do things that maybe doesn't help the owner so much, and it doesn't hurt the city.
Where you mentioned international, what will the expansion look like for Major League Baseball and their press to be more international?
That's a great question. I think it starts with them changing the All-Star game. I know Smoltz was talking about this pretty recently. Are they going to go to a world versus U.S.? I would not like that for U.S. right now because the international game is so good, and that's almost too big. But it brings back that world class feel, and I think it'd be really, really neat to see in baseball, you know, seeing Mike Trout, Ohtani match up again. You have Captain America versus, you know, a legend from Japan who's kind of taken this game by storm over the last couple of years because he's doing things that are unprecedented. So I think that would be a first step. But they're starting to play. They just released a schedule. They're going all over the world. I mean, they're going to play in South Korea. You have the Dodgers next year playing South Korea. They're going back into England. They're going to go to Mexico. They're going to play more games in Canada. You see them rebuilding a stadium in Birmingham, one of the oldest stadiums in the United States. They're going to revamp it, put all types of things around it and go play there. I think they're doing a lot of good when it comes to growing the game internationally. And you got to mention the kid that got drafted top 10. He's from India. If that hits and that kid takes off, which he's a remarkable human being from everything I've heard, you have an entire different market. I'm talking billion of people. That's nuts.
Michael McHenry, our guest here on Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow. You mentioned Ohtani there. What are you thinking happens? Do they trade him or don't they trade him by the deadline? And if so, do you have a team or two that you feel like is a no-brainer to trade for Ohtani knowing that they can get a long-term contract?
You have to trade him. I don't see him making the playoffs with Trout being down. You know, he just hurt his hamate bone, so he's out. Their pitching's kind of been iffy over the last couple of years, so I trade him and I try to get a haul back for him. I mean, literally just pull up your Brinks truck, pack in your prospects, and drive away because you're not going to get this guy back. You're not going to sign him for $500 million. He's probably going to be one of the first guys to possibly get stake in ownership with the team or some other team in that city. This guy is a special breed of talent. I think the New York Mets, I think the Los Angeles Dodgers are ready to go and have literally structured their entire last couple years to get Ohtani now. So they could be a team that goes after him and it changes the entire structure of their team and what they can do. And you're getting 2 for 1. I mean, think about that. You're getting 2 players in one. It's a joke. So it's going to be very interesting. And just like I said last week, you can never, ever count out Cohen the way he throws around money.
And Chad, I mean, if he's traded, if he stays in the AL, we could see him go at Judge's record that was just set.
Yeah, I was. It was really cool too at the All-Star game. A couple, really neat moments was the Mariners fans chanting "Come to Seattle" when Ohtani was batting. Was neat,
and he said he loves the city.
Yeah, and then having Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman mic'd up when he was batting together. I love the mic'd up segments when they're in the field. And they said, hey, how about Ohtani as a Dodger? And I think Freddie Freeman said that would be tampering if we answer that, so we can't say it. But then Mookie Betts said, but, yeah, obviously we'd welcome him. We'd happily welcome him to the locker room. I thought that was great for the game to see that and to see that response to this guy. And it is going to be an enormous story with whatever happens, Michael. Let me ask you this, because he has said that as the years go on, not winning is becoming more important to him, that the desire to win grows. If he goes to the Mets, is he going to be able to sell that, hey, I'm going to go there and win? I mean, I guess ultimately they will because they're willing to spend whatever it takes. But what do you think about that decision? If this is really about, I want to go to an organization where I'm going to get paid a ton of money anywhere, but I want to go and win, would the Mets make the most sense for that?
Honestly, no. I think when you're pushing so hard, sometimes you lose sight of what's going on in the clubhouse, what's going on around you, and you're not talking to the people on the ground. And I was just with Tyler Matzik, and a bunch of his teammates were down in Georgia at a lake. I didn't see his teammates, but I did hang out with Tyler, and Tyler was talking about how good the Braves culture is and how the GM comes down the clubhouse. He talks to the guys. He wants to understand, hey, is this a good clubhouse guy? Does he fit what we have going on right now? And that's why they've locked up so many guys. I mean, they have almost an entire team locked up through 27, and they're all perennial all-stars. I mean, you look at what they've done there. They've built a group of guys that during their all-star break, you have 5 guys. Some just came over in free agency this year. Some guys have been there for a while. They're all hanging out together, their wives, their family. That's special. I had that in 2012 and 2013 with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and we ended up making it to the playoffs. We didn't get as far as the Braves did, but that's what builds that winning culture, and that's what Ohtani's looking at. That's why he said something about Seattle. He lived there a little bit, but he saw what the fans did and how it was almost like that 10th man yelling and screaming for him, but they also saw what they were doing for J-Rod every time he went to the plate and how special it was for him. I don't think he's getting that treatment in Anaheim. If he was, maybe you think about staying there because you do have another superhuman on that team, but I'm sure he's looking at the Dodgers and the way they took in Freddie Freeman, the way they've taken in Mookie Betts and some other superstars, but those dudes want to win. That's why I feel like LA's the front runner. I feel like they're going to go all in with him. That's Magic Johnson to a T. He wants to make a huge splash. And 2, you think about all the money that's going to bring in, not just in LA, but internationally. So this guy's going to look at it from a lot of different spectrums. He's going to get plenty of money, so he may take less to go to the better culture.
Final thing for you, Michael. Players are advocating for a longer pitch clock in the playoffs. Is this going to get done? And do you agree that that needs to happen?
Yeah, I don't want to see a game in any stretch be taken away from the players on the field. I don't want an umpire saying, hey, pitch clock violation, or this happened, or this happened. I want them to play it outright. So in my opinion, and I've talked to a lot of guys about this, is just do it 20 seconds all the time. There hasn't been a lot of issues with guys on base. There have been more issues when guys aren't on base. Guy goes and covers a base, and he's walking back, anxiety's high, heart's pumping, and he can't catch his breath. So give that guy that 20 seconds at all costs. Everything else should stay the same, but then you're universal all the way through. There's no changing. because they're going to change the in-between time. So Apple games, Peacock games, anything that's right now national games, they're 2:30. Everything else is 2:15. So the break is different. So guys have not adjusted all of that, and there's been more infractions during those games, I believe, last I looked. So maybe just keep it universal. Go 2:30 all the time and go 20 seconds all the time. We're still probably going to be under 3 hours almost every single game.
The Fort McHenry is how you follow Michael on social. Michael McHenry has been our guest. Always great insight and analysis. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, guys. God bless.
Yep, same to you, Michael McHenry. Getting it done. Great setup there, too.
He does a great job.
Yeah, he was great.
Love having Michael on the show.
As the co-host with Chad last week. Coming up, who knew the ESPYs were last night? And the NCAA tournament, it's not expanding now, but they're going to. And I don't like it. Details coming up next on Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I just think the way Anthony Bass handled this was so sloppy.
Oh, I think it's perfect.
And what he reposted,
he bent the knee and bowed. He was going to catch the ceremonial first pitch.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
When you're behind closed doors, when you're talking to plant managers, when you're having meetings, when you're with the team, was there an acknowledgement of any of this, an acknowledgement of the situation, the boycott, and then the doubling down about moving away from the fratty image?
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human being. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it, people. I'm pissed off about this. I never did it before in my life, but Trump is being cheated. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
I believe this person is the greatest player anybody alive will ever see. How can you hate Derek Jeter? A guy's on-base percentage tells me his batting eye, and a guy's slugging percentage tells me if he's a threat. That's the kind of guy that throws a no-hitter, that effectively wild guy.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Old taste of a Southern legend.
Just like that, the second hour is here. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network, the Thursday edition. Armando Salguero of OutKick.com covers the NFL. He talks NFL with us. It's coming up in 20 minutes. And later in today's show, Ramon Diaz Jr., former Northwestern football player from years ago, 2005 to 2008. He's put his name behind the comments that we've largely seen in anonymity regarding the culture behind the scenes at Northwestern from his time there, where he's validating what took place in the reports from the Daily Northwestern and those that aren't using their name, but certainly their sources for these reports that ultimately led to Pat Fitzgerald being fired. And while he wasn't the head coach in 2005, he was there, and then became the head coach in 2006. Can't wait to talk with Ramon Diaz a bit later in the show. It's coming up in about an hour and 15 minutes or so from now. Chad, last night, the ESPYs. And we had no clue that the ESPYs were on.
Yeah, we had a nice dinner, Hutton, you and I enjoyed the evening and had fun here in Nashville. And not at one point in the entire evening did I think, you know what, I really need to get home and catch the ESPYs. Never thought that all night. And I've talked about this before when there's so much outrage about things that ESPN or the ESPYs that they do, that they award, that they honor during these shows. And it really all starts to matter less when you start caring less. And I am here to tell you, this is a true confession right now. Me, Chad Withrow, I watched the ESPYs for years because it was the sporting event on a night where there's no sports. Last night, forgot it happened, didn't watch a replay of it, haven't seen a single clip from it. And I am here to confess to you that my life is not worse because of it. Don't care. It really is a passing, not even a passing thought. It is an afterthought of what goes on in the sports landscape now. And it's because of a lot of silly things that they've done. It's also because award shows in general are so incredibly awkward and I think are really on the downturn with all of them for the most part. So didn't watch it, didn't care, and I think people that get really upset about things that the ESPYs will do, if you stop caring and stop watching, I think you'll find that your life is not worse because of it. And one of the things that is a reason you probably shouldn't watch is something we're about to talk about that they tried to pull last night.
Yeah, luckily social media has receipts just like ESPN has the rights to the content, where Will Cain, formerly of ESPN, now with Fox, he is, at the time, this is 4 years ago, with Charlie Arnault, who's sitting in with Will on First Take on ESPN 4 years ago. And they get into equal pay and the discussion about the U.S. men's national team and men's soccer in general and the revenue versus what was seen and known for the U.S. women's national team, which has been and still remains their top priority. They want equal pay. And Will was laying out why it's just not a black and white issue, and it's not just a clear cut, that's what they're getting, so that's what you're getting. And they took a piece of this segment, which you'll hear in just a moment, and inserted it into this montage as they handed out last night the Arthur Ashe Courage Award for the U.S. women's national team, discussing equal pay and women's rights. And it comes across in the piece, in the montage, as Will Cain, sexist. But it's not the case at all if you listen to what he was actually saying and you don't just clip the one sentence. So you'll hear portions of what was going down last night, and then you'll hear Charlie Arnault and Will Cain from First Take 4 years ago.
I think equal pay is a ridiculous concept in and of itself. Soccer, for better or worse, on the men's side, across this globe, is much more popular than the women's.
Oh, we get that argument all the time.
I'll tell you why it's like this. Now, there's two things, first of all. When you talk about, as Trevor Scales just laid out, the bonus difference between the men's team and the women's team, between what a winner, if it had been the U.S. men, would get in the World Cup and the women. The women got a pool, or got paid out from a pool of $30 million from the Women's World Cup. The men would draw from a pool of $400 million, okay? $400 million, $30 million. Why is that? It's because the Men's World Cup generates $6 billion in revenue. The Women's World Cup generates $131 million in revenue. If you want to talk about pay disparity, the Women's World Cup players get paid out 20% of the total revenue. The men get paid out 7%. As a percentage point, they are getting much more. The problem is, for anybody desiring equal pay, and by the way, I think equal pay is a ridiculous concept in and of itself. If the women generate more revenue, they should get paid more than the men. Don't strive for getting the same, strive for getting what you're worth. And if you're worth more, then get more. And so what I'm saying to you right now is soccer, for better or worse, on the men's side, across this globe, is much more popular than women's soccer.
The women's game had higher ratings than the men's, though. So what do you say to that?
Charlie, that's in the United States.
That was in the U.S.
And that's comparing a women's World Cup final that featured the United States against a men's World Cup final in the United States that didn't feature the U.S.
I mean, when you hear all of that in its entirety, it's way different than the small clip that they inserted, along with they're showing different tweets and feedback and, you know, reaction to the idea of equal pay. And you can see how it's taken way out of context.
Yeah, it was intellectually dishonest of ESPN to play the clip the way they did it. I'll also say this. When did facts become sexist? Because I heard the clip they played, and I didn't even think it was that bad. He said, for better or worse, men's soccer is more popular across the globe. What is sexist about that? That's true. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't even know why he would be mad, or anyone would. I'd say that right now, and you could clip that all day. I'm speaking of fact.
What they clipped is him also saying, I think equal pay is a ridiculous concept in and of itself.
Yes.
And it was playing into their theme and their tone of propping up the U.S. women's national team for, you know, being so courageous in their fight for this.
Yeah, and what Will was saying, and you're right about that part, that, again, intellectually dishonest of ESPN to do all of this. But what he's saying about the equal pay, and you hear more of it there with that clip, is if they were making more or there was more interest, they should make more than the men. You know, it shouldn't be just about just making it equal. It's about what you're worth. So go get what you're worth. I agree with everything that he's saying. You know, if you're going to frame it in that text, the whole thing about equal pay is if you're doing the exact same job and you're worth the same amount in that job, then women should make the exact same amount as men, which I agree with that. If you're doing the same job and you are as valuable in that job, then you should make the equivalent of what the male counterpart makes in that same position. But this also leaves out, look, this is saying they're soccer players. So soccer players should make the same amount, right? They're all playing soccer. They're playing the same sport.
And it doesn't point to revenue.
One's a man's, one's a woman. But we live in a market-based economy, and you are what you generate, and you are what you're worth ultimately. And Will did a good job laying out the numbers there in that conversation with Charlie about $6 billion versus, I think the number he said was $180 million is what the World Cup generates, men to women. So it is going to be different.
131.
I've always argued this about the U.S. women's national team. I don't really understand. I mean, I understand it. I know Megan Rapinoe is annoying and she whines and people hate her politics and all that. I get that part of it. I don't necessarily understand the dislike, the disdain for the U.S. women's national team for this reason. In this country, we do applaud excellence, and they are excellent. They are the best
Dominant.
on the global stage. They win World Cups. That's something our men's team would never dream of doing.
Yeah.
That may never happen in anyone's lifetime, the U.S. men winning a World Cup. And they do that consistently. So I applaud the excellence on the pitch of the U.S. women's national team. I don't know, maybe they get this. I would like sort of an incentive-based pay. They should make $500,000 apiece if they win the World Cup. I'm all for that.
Based on results?
Based on results. You make the final, you make a certain amount. I'm sure that they have an escalator where they get more the further they go. But I've long been in favor of that. But, I mean, to say that men's sports is more popular than women's sports on the whole, and that men's soccer is more popular and generates more money than women's soccer. Therefore, men get paid more than women in soccer. That's not sexist. Those are facts. We can't misconstrue facts for racist or sexist.
Well,
those are the facts.
But also, like, it's a case in point would be in college right now with name, image, likeness. You know, you're paid based on your value, popularity. Livy Dunn is now doing national commercials for, is it her brand, her clothing brand, or is she?
No, it's for Viore. It's a brand that's been around.
But I mean, she's doing more than just Instagram posts now, you know, and it's not any of the quarterbacks we're discussing, you know. But we can also compare it to what we saw from Alabama last year. I mean, they have players on national commercials. Livy Dunn's doing that too.
And hey, people that want to get on Livy Dunn and say, "Well, what has she done? Why?" That's ridiculous, right? That to me is more sexist than what Will Kane or anyone there is saying. When someone says, "Why is this little girl making so much money? What has she done?" Well, she's got a following and she's got a marketing ability, and people want her associated with their brand, so she's going to make a ton of money for that. Good for her.
Great moment last night from the ESPYs was Demar Hamlin being recognized and then recognizing all of the first responders that were on hand for that Monday Night Football game where he collapsed. And, I mean, Chad, there was a long waiting period where it was assumed things were not going to turn out well. It was assumed that based on what we all witnessed on national TV, he was dying. And he was sobbing on stage as he was surrounded by those that were there with him and that cared for him that night in Cincy. Those are the good moments that you clip and remember. Dick Vitale at the ESPYs discussing his battle with cancer and announcing last August that he had received a clean bill of health regarding it, saying that he was through it. He's recently been diagnosed with vocal cord cancer. Now he says that, you know, it's very treatable, curable, a high success rate on that with the treatments. It's unlikely that he's a part of courtside broadcasts this year. I hate that. That is just cruel. The cancer, you know,
is back.
They don't pick sides on that.
No,
it sucks.
That's unfortunate. The Demar Hamlin thing. That's where, again, I didn't watch the ESPYs, and I'm not missing the ESPYs, but that's what they do well, is a moment like that. They also typically, other than being intellectually dishonest about Will Kane and what exactly he said, typically their pre-produced stuff is really good.
Yeah.
When they have the feel-good story or the tearjerker thing, they can really do a good job pre-producing a segment for that. I've argued that the ESPYs should not be a live event. I think it could be a package of vignettes. I think you could honor sports for the year in a very detailed way that would tug at the heartstrings and make people emotional and excited and everything else by just tapping into the production capabilities of ESPN and all the great people they have working there that are really good at doing that, at producing segments for TV. I think that would be something I would watch more than, and I think Pat McAfee's terrifically talented, but I'm going to watch that more than Pat McAfee standing up making jokes in front of a crowd that doesn't want to hear jokes because they all take themselves far too seriously at the ESPYs. I'd rather see more of that. Now, if you're going to get together just to have a moment like that with Demar Hamlin, the first responders, all for it. But in general, that's a show that works best when they cut away from the stage and they're showing something they pre-produced in a video.
Yeah, and just a quick reminder, Demar Hamlin was in the best location, best spot possible for that heart issue to occur because of the number of first responders, the requirements that the league has medically on hand. If that happens on a sidewalk, he's dying, right? I mean, the best of the best from the local hospitals are there on game day. Not just for that reason, but for significant injury where a player needs to be carted off and potentially hospitalized. And I keep thinking about, man, if that happened anywhere else, he's likely not receiving all of that care in time. You know, this immediate CPR and the ways they handled it, and the determinations made to take him, and learning thereafter that, Chad, that was a good sign, not a bad sign, that they put him into the ambulance and
I remember we had a
brought
doctor
his mom
on.
along with
We had a
him.
cardiologist on that talked about this, and the example they used of commotio cordis, which is what we think happened with Demar Hamlin, even though no one has said it for whatever reason, was someone got hit by a lacrosse ball that went through a lawnmower and hit them in the perfect spot in the chest, the perfect spot of the heartbeat in the middle of it, and they suffered this. And they're only alive because someone else was on the front porch or outside and saw it, witnessed it happen. And I think about that, what you just said, he was in the perfect spot with medical professionals and all eyes on him.
Players around
in that moment, immediately getting the help they needed. But if you're mowing the yard and no one's around and that happens,
I know
you're probably gone, right? It's crazy to think about life, circumstance, chance in that way, and cool to see it honored that way with those that helped save the life of Demar Hamlin.
Yeah, that was a cool
Really
moment.
cool.
Yeah. Mondo Salguero about to join us. Covers the NFL for OutKick.com. He's back on the show coming up, and there's a lot to discuss. Saquon Barkley potentially holding out, and what's up with DeAndre Hopkins? Plenty of discussion across the league. That's next right here on Hot Mic.
Of male advantage plaguing women's sports, it only recently came to light, I feel like, for so many, including myself. I was really only became aware of this when I was slapped across the face with it in regards to Leah Thomas. But as you alluded to, this is something that you had experience of. You were well ahead of your time. I mean, 43 years ago, you saw this. And so would you be able to touch on what that experience looked like competing against the East Germans?
And we would have East German athletes turning up to things like even like the Olympics, and we'd never, ever seen them before. And they would literally arrive and smash world records. They looked and sounded like, very masculine. They had deep voices, very large Adam apple, bad skin, through no fault of their own. I've never had a problem with these individuals. They were pawns of a horrible system. The people I have a big problem with is the IOC. And they allowed this to happen for 20 years. They even had East German doctors sitting on international doping panels. So every time we came up with a way to try and catch them, they would find a way to avoid being caught. And this was allowed to go on for 2 decades. So imagine the number of females that missed out. However, those females only missed out at international competitions, and they predominantly missed out in swimming, track and field, and rowing. What we've got now is 10 times worse, because this is happening across every single sport, at every single level, in every single country. So I've been pushing very hard to say, right, we need to have a female classification, however that looks. Me, ideally, I'd love to bring back sex tests. And then an open and inclusive category so that everyone is still welcome in sport. Because just like you, I'm sure, you want people to do sport. You want people to be physically active, to be healthy, because it helps us, both our body and our minds, and in a world at the moment with mental health, particularly in young girls, through the roof, we need people to be physically active. So it's the last thing in the world I would ever want to do is to ban anyone from sports. I just want to protect the opportunities for people that are biologically female to have equal chance of being able to win medals, put successes onto their onto their CV going forward, get university scholarships, get places on teams, be proud of records that they set, whatever it is. Females are worthy of equal opportunity. We are not second-class citizens, and I'm not prepared to sit back and pretend that we are. So,
amen. Oh my gosh, it's so true. There is no compromise for women. There is nothing that we should have to give up to ensure that trans athletes can compete. But that being said, trans athletes shouldn't be banned from sports. Of course not. And that's something that we see in the States a lot, especially in regards to state legislature being pushed. The opposition, they always say this is an anti-trans bill that bans trans athletes from competing. And that's simply not true. I love how you mentioned it equips people with the right information, with effective messaging, how to communicate about it, what to do. really powerful. You mentioned in your book, you had a quote, I think it's from Cynthia Millen, and it says, bodies compete against bodies, gender identities don't swim, which is, that's the basis of the argument.
How do we marshal feelings? It's ridiculous. You know, if we turn around and say that we're going to accept a feeling that says someone can feel like a male or a female depending on their feeling, not the reality of their body, where does that stop? You know, what's the next feeling that's going to trump a reality? And we're not doing our kids any favors by not dealing with the truth. You know, it's by telling young children that they're going to be able to change sex when they're not. They're going to have to take medication for the rest of their life. They're going to have to do things to their bodies which will probably shorten their lives.
Sixth and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Armando Salguero covers the NFL for OutKick.com. He's always at a different location with the backdrop when he joins us.
Armando and I are about to be best friends.
Yes.
He'll be on co-hosting the show tomorrow. Special guest co-host,
yes,
Armando Salguero.
Armando, thank you for sitting in tomorrow with Chad.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. It's, it's Friday, and that is the best part of the week coming up tomorrow. I'm not saying that, because I have to, Chad. I'm saying it because I actually mean it.
Yeah.
And I just want you guys to know that it couldn't be any better way for me to end my first week back from vacation.
You guys going to get into the Madden ratings and debate?
This
like
is what I do with Armando. I get so excited when he comes on. I appreciate him helping out. It's always great to have his voice on the show. That I just give him veto power over every story in the rundown. I say, if Armando doesn't want anything, we're going to exit out and we're not going to discuss it. And I don't know that he's used that veto power yet, maybe once or twice. But if there's a story on that rundown that he doesn't want to talk about, we will not discuss it on the show tomorrow. That I can guarantee, Armando.
We won't be discussing NBA and because it'll put me to sleep, and I probably will not be too thrilled about the ESPYs because I'm not a big fan of ESPN after they fired me. And
well, and they're spending how much? What was the?
I mean, they could hire 8,000 Armando Salgueros for what they spend on the ESPY Awards.
I mean,
Armando.
Those that are no longer with the four-letter network would say they were spending upwards of $7 or $8 million on that show. Had you heard that?
I have not. Look, I stopped watching when. Never mind. I'm not.
I mean, we're not watching either. We didn't watch it either. And the ratings will probably reflect the same thing for the vast majority of the viewing public there with the audience.
Let me put it to you this way.
Yeah.
I'd rather watch reruns of Downton Abbey than watch the ESPYs, all right? That's how I feel.
Fair enough. I'm not going to watch it either. Just,
I need to start Downton Abbey now is what I'm hearing. I've never watched the show.
That was his binge during vacation, I believe. DeAndre Hopkins, all of a sudden yesterday, the Vegas odds flipped. And it could be a number of reasons why. But when Vegas odds flip, Vegas knows something. It went from like plus 500 odds for him landing in Tennessee with the Titans and not New England to minus 300 yesterday.
It was a big flip.
It
wasn't a slight flip.
Is this just opinion why that would go? Is this insider info, or is this just reacting to those insiders in New England that are also saying, like Mike Reese and others, that are also saying, yeah, he's probably going to the Titans because they've been more aggressive in their offer?
Well, the Titans have been more aggressive, but it's the difference between, someone looking at you really, really hard or someone like holding your hand. It's not exactly like either team or any team so far has been what I would call aggressive in that The money is not, from what I've heard, is not anything that DeAndre Hopkins at this point wants to play for in 2023. I will say this. The idea that Vegas knows stuff, I think I have to push back a little bit on that. Years ago, when the mob ran Las Vegas, I think Las Vegas knew stuff. I think they absolutely had insights and were connected to things in sports. And I'm not just talking NFL, all sports.
Yeah.
But those days have come and gone, and now it's corporations that are mostly running Las Vegas. And Las Vegas told me that Tom Brady was going to be the quarterback for the hometown Las Vegas Raiders. How'd that work out? The idea that the odds changed because Vegas knows things, I'm not so sure that Vegas knows all that much anymore.
If there's a weird spread that's at like 5.5, they'll be right around that number, and Chad and I will be emptying our pocketbooks. That happens once or twice a football season.
Well, and the other possible explanation is that someone placed such a large bet, or a number of large bets came in at one time, that while Vegas may not know, like you're saying, Armando, they get the sense that someone out there knows based on a bet coming in and how much was placed. Yeah. That could also be part of it. Sometimes just the money will move it. It's not Vegas moving, it's how the bets come in can change it.
If that's true, that person better not be associated with the NFL, because number one, that's out of bounds, and number two, they will get caught.
Well, what's best for DeAndre Hopkins? Let's just say right now the two offers that are on the table, the Chiefs reported interest there, but they haven't made an offer, and they don't really have salary cap room right now. But if it comes down to Titans, Patriots, what is the best spot for DeAndre Hopkins football-wise?
Can I pick C? Look, DeAndre Hopkins is on the wrong side of 30 now, right? And a player like that who isn't going to be highly paid, he has probably made the most money that he is going to make in a contract year already. And so from now on, what is likely to happen is he is going to be a year-to-year guy, or he is going to be a mid-range kind of player. And by mid-range, I mean $7, $8, $9 million a year. I'm not talking about the $20 to $25 million a year that the elite receivers get, or even the $15 million that the next run down gets, like OBJ. So he is not going to maximize on the money. What I suggest that he do is maximize on the opportunity and the payoff to his career. And how do you get the payoff? You play on a team that is going to compete and has a chance to win a championship. So, do the New England Patriots have a chance to win a championship in 2023? Are they going to be in the Super Bowl next February? No, they're not. And, you can argue that they're the fourth best team in the AFC East, which is, fine, except for the fact that the AFC East has 4 teams. Are the Titans going to compete for a Super Bowl next year?
No.
Nope.
They're not. So why is DeAndre Hopkins, why would one of those teams be so attractive to him when he perhaps can sit and wait out the opportunity or the possibility that a receiver on a Super Bowl contender goes down, and then all of a sudden you're the next guy that is on the free agency priority list, and you're on a Super Bowl champ or a potential Super Bowl champ. And, are you getting maximum dollars? No, but you're not going to get maximum dollars anyway.
Armando, let's stay with just tying in the Patriots discussion. There's a report from the Boston Globe that says friends of New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick believe that the 6-time Super Bowl winner for the franchise could be on the hot seat in 2023. Is that how crazy does that sound? Now, they then go on to reference, along with the friends of Bill Belichick, that Robert Kraft already made it clear in March that he wants the Patriots to make the postseason and win a playoff game for the first time in 5 years. I don't know the dynamic between Kraft and Belichick, but it was always Brady and Kraft whenever they were trying to talk things through. And I don't know if I get the sense that, they get along all that well. I'm assuming they do. How could you not with the success rate of Bill Belichick? Hot seat? Really?
There have been moments when Robert Kraft of late has called out Bill Belichick without really going scorched earth on it.
Yeah.
He has talked about how we haven't won a playoff game, in 5 years. He has talked about how we're not that team anymore. He even has talked about how Belichick told him that Tom Brady was just about done and had lost the fastball. The Patriots obviously let Tom Brady walk into winning another Super Bowl the very next year. So there have been moments where Robert Kraft has seen what Bill Belichick has done of late and shown his displeasure with it. Does that rise to you're on the hot seat, Bill Belichick? Are we talking about Bill Belichick winning 3 games next year? Yeah, then he'd be on the hot seat. Are we talking about him winning 9 games and he's on the hot seat and he doesn't make the playoffs? I don't buy that. I think Bill Belichick is going to go for Don Shula's all-time wins record. And I think that barring a catastrophic collapse, he's going to try and do it, and he's going to do it if he can with the New England Patriots. And the Patriots, Robert Kraft, will let him do that.
Playoffs are pink slips, Chad.
Yeah, crazy. Armando, it's amazing how quickly we went from Buffalo, Kansas City as the teams and the Super Bowl hopefuls to Buffalo, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, and not talking about Buffalo as a Super Bowl contender. But when you look at this Bills team, should we be talking more about them as a legitimate Super Bowl champion contender?
Yes. I don't see why not. There are reasons that make you go, Look, there is a certain window that opens for certain teams. And after a while, if they don't capitalize on that window being open, things start to happen. And things have started to happen to the Bills. And I'm not talking about this year. They lost arguably their best offensive mind, not arguably, but in fact, their best offensive mind in Brian Daboll, who became the head coach of the New York Giants. He took a couple of assistants with him, including the quarterback coach. Both of those guys were responsible for Josh Allen, the assistant quarterback coach, excuse me. They're now trying to figure it out on defense without Leslie Frazier as the defensive coordinator because Sean McDermott has decided I'm going to do a better job than what he did. I wasn't happy with what he did. So there's going to be a little, I would say, not friction, but it's going to be a learning curve there. There's different guys. They've graduated players. Edmonds is gone. They've lost a couple of guys. Their salary cap isn't to the point where you can just go out and add the best talent. And players are a year older. Von Miller is coming back from, reconstructive knee surgery, and he's a year older. So is their opportunity maximized to what it was maybe 2 years ago or before those 13 seconds against the Kansas City Chiefs? No. But does that mean that they're not one of those teams? No. I think they're still very talented. And if you have Josh Allen, it's like Joe Burrow said, when does the window close on the Cincinnati Bengals? Not as long as I'm here. That applies to Josh Allen as well.
Do you think Saquon Barkley won't sign the franchise tag by Monday's deadline?
I think, number one, they're working towards getting a deal done, and they want to. When you see these leaks from both sides of this issue, it's obvious that they both are trying to get the leg up on the other as we get to that deadline. And they're both feeling a little heat, and they both want to reach for whatever advantage they can find. And as they get to the finish line. So I think that something probably will happen. If it doesn't, Saquon Barkley's not going to walk away from $10 million this year.
Right.
He might not show up for training camp, or he might not show up, early in training camp. But is he going to walk away from $10 million as a running back in the NFL? Ask Le'Veon Bell how that worked out. He never made up his money. And, he is the example number one of how a running back shouldn't handle his negotiation in that regard.
Armando, thank you for sitting in with Chad tomorrow. We'll catch up soon. Armando Salguero.
See you tomorrow,
joins
Armando.
Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow tomorrow here on the network.
What is your primary complaint when people pop their knuckles?
Primary complaint is chewing with your mouth open. Yuck.
I would say when you're getting off an airplane and people in the back try and sprint to the front, especially like late at night, like you don't have a connecting flight, just wait like everybody else. I'd say that's fine.
Small portions, big bill. Yeah, if the quality's good, it's okay. But if they're small portions and I got a big fat bill, not a thing,
Sun Country Airlines canceling our flight less than 8 hours before we're supposed to leave.
I've never even heard of Sun Country Airlines in my life.
Velcro.
Velcro? Why? What about it?
The sound.
Oh, like nails on a chalkboard for you.
I'm a kindergarten teacher, and to hear that Velcro.
Time to teach them how to tie their shoes.
When they don't cross the road when no cars are driving.
They're just waiting for the light?
Yeah, like a normal person.
Yeah, you got to break the rules a little bit.
We're right from New York City. We know how to walk.
Really upset. Ben Jones is no longer with the Titans, but more importantly, I'm upset the Titans didn't draft a wide receiver in the top 2 rounds. We need receivers, guys. Come on, tighten up.
So what do you think about Will Levis? Was that a good move or a bad move?
Ooh, that's a tough call. Time will tell. But I think we needed a receiver more.
Smack their gum, chew with their mouth open and smack their gum.
Okay.
That with chips and everything else, yeah. Liars.
Liars, okay. Has anyone lied to you recently?
No.
Have you lied?
Always.
One of the biggest pet peeves is not knowing your manners. Like, not having respect or thank you, sir, ma'am.
My biggest pet peeve is when you don't push your chair in after you leave a table. That's my biggest pet peeve. Really is.
So like when people want to speak to you and they're like you to me, but they start walking out of the other room into different rooms and they keep talking like, I am supposed to understand. I can't hardly understand people when their back is turned to me, when they're not talking right at me. So when you're getting into different rooms and you keep talking like, yeah, blah, 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 it must be my dog talking to me.
There's a crane over every building. There's a truck.
There's a hole, something. Yeah. So let's get the streets fixed and get those things done. Time's wasted. Let's go.
A dirty house.
Dirty house. Like, are you a shoes off at the front door kind of guy?
Off front, yes, ma'am.
I hate it when centre backs don't bat the odd one. Do you know,
What?
when the centre backs go up to try and catch the ball all the time, they should back the odd one.
You know, siblings are pet peeves, you know, to be honest with you. You know, just looking at him, he's a pet peeve.
I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I like to get along with others. I kind of leave people in their place. When people don't follow the social construct, it really upsets me. Example, when you stand up on an airplane, right when it lands, and then try to push past people down the line, you know what orders you're supposed to go in. That's the part of the social contract. When you're grocery shopping and you have your cart and you don't take it back to the cart delivery spot, but you just leave it by there beside the parking spot, taking up someone else's spot, violating the social contract. Do what you're supposed to. Yeah, do your civic duty. Follow through with what your parents told you to do.
Coming up, Daniel Snyder remains in the headlines. He could be throwing a wrench into the Washington Commanders and the NFL's, their dream of getting him out of the league. Details on that coming up. Plus,
the dream could become a nightmare.
Yes. Plus, NCAA tournament expansion in college basketball. Is it happening, and how soon? Chat, Ed Orgeron. The rumor mills, the reports swirling about him and interest in Northwestern and then vice versa. That headline yesterday when Davey Hudson joined us and he was reading this to us, we're like, this makes no sense whatsoever. But does it make so little sense that it actually makes sense? And the question became, could you actually make the argument that Ed Orgeron and Northwestern would be amazing partners as Edo is at the helm of the football program? And that led to a segment called Hear Me Out.
Stop! 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 Please let me go! Please let me go first! I'm doing something!
That was a great Tim Robinson from I Think You Should Leave.
I Think You Should Leave. So hear me out as Davey joins us as well.
Hear Me Out is essentially, this is the way you would announce something coming up that is probably going to be unpopular. That you know what the response is going to be from everyone, so you start by just saying, well, hear me out on this. Hear me out. It's usually followed by something you immediately regret saying. So I think Davey's going to kick us off, and maybe he will regret saying what he's going to say.
But let's first start, Davey, with could you make the argument that Edo and Northwestern are great for each other?
It would be a tough sell, but the biggest thing that I would say is, based off my love life, opposites attract sometimes is the great year, been the best year and a half you can have. So that would be the selling point I would have there. Now, will it ultimately end in failure, probably a big scandal, and a lot of other things that Northwestern's having to clean up on top of the issues they're dealing with now? Would probably say yes. But you know what? It'd be a fun year.
A fun
and
one
just
year.
Because
that would not result in a new stadium.
And just because people get divorced doesn't mean they don't get remarried later on. That's the thing. So
can you imagine the group of nerds on Northwestern's campus that's forming that alliance to block the $800 million stadium? Their response to Ed Orgeron being the new hire.
Imagine the digging behind the scenes that would go on by the Daily Northwestern on that program.
Oh, my goodness. Now, I just wish this rumor would have lasted longer. And that, was it Bruce Feldman that came out and just completely squashed it?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, man, could we have not just let this stay out there just a little bit longer? Now, Davey, to your point, I will say on this, hear me out with that. What other national championship winning head coach could Northwestern hire? I mean, you're hiring a coach who has won a national championship. Les Miles? Or do they vacate?
He gone.
I mean,
that one's still they have not had to vacate that. They did have to vacate several wins though, and those wins are going to cost Les Miles a chance at being in the College Football Hall of Fame based off the winning percentage there. But with Ed O, I mean, the main question I have for you, Chad, but the answer simply is there isn't a championship winning head coach that they could go and pull. At least not a live one. So my biggest thing, though, was like, what is the equivalent in Chicago for Ed Orgeron's chicken on stick or coleslaw in a cup? So that's the big thing I have if that were to happen.
It's the Chicago beef sandwich would be, I think, the thing he'd have to get into.
Okay.
He'd have to embrace that culture. The hot dogs with a really bright relish on it.
The dick of dogs.
I could see Coach O getting into the hot dogs, the really bright relish. I mean, I think that's, he would take to that part of it, the food culture, pretty well. The rest of it, not a cultural fit at all.
Well, let's discuss the intriguing coaching moves that we could argue make a ton of sense. So let me kick it off by saying, hear me out on this. Ryan Day at Ohio State is supposedly on the hot seat because of the recent record against Michigan. He takes over a program that was dominant against the Wolverines. And we know how that has gone on the last couple of seasons and how Michigan has handled them at the line of scrimmage, and they've routed them. Ryan Day, if he's losing again to Michigan, I think Ryan Day makes a ton of sense as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. He made sense prior to them hiring Matt Eberflus. And they've got this pitch with the new stadium that they're trying to get built. It's on hold. They're trying to find the right property that will allow them to actually build where they want to build and the stadium that they want. And Justin Fields and Ryan Day, I think that would be a great match, as well as Ryan Day in the NFL. I think there's only a handful of coaches I would love to see make that jump. And based on, you're winning at a higher rate at Ohio State. You're losing to your arch rival. Had they met for the college football national championship game, that would have been fascinating to see reaction. And there's already this swirl of, man, he's feeling pressure to win. You're feeling pressure to win all the time there. It would take losing in a bad way yet again to Michigan. It's possible. And if I'm Chicago, I'm picking up the phone and calling Ryan Day to get things right for a quarterback that they've doubled back on and said, no, we had the top pick, but we're sticking with our young quarterback, and we're going to put pieces around him now. I'd love to see Ryan Day coach Justin Fields.
I like it, Hutton, and there's one other connection you didn't bring up. Who is the president now of the Chicago Bears? Former Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren, who would know Ryan Day well.
Yeah, that's a great point.
As another possible connection with Ryan Day to the Bears. I
and
like that
how Ryan continues to lose to Michigan, he could then do the same with Chicago to Green Bay.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers could continue to flaunt ownership of the Bears, even from the Jets, even when Ryan Day's there. So he likes being owned by a certain program. Hear me out. I'm going to stick with Ohio State as the emphasis of what I'm going to talk about here. Pat Fitzgerald's next landing spot. No, not as the head coach at Ohio State because Ryan Day took the Chicago Bears job as Hutton proposition. Pat Fitzgerald would make a pretty good defensive coordinator for Ohio State if it does not work out with Jim Knowles this year in Columbus. Jim Knowles was brought on from Oklahoma State for $2+ million a year. It was the defense that failed Ohio State a year ago. Failure against Michigan, failed them late against Georgia also. When they got the lead, they needed something from the defense. They did not get it. Ryan Day was recently on a podcast with Greg McIlroy where he said, well, it starts with the defense in terms of improvement. There is pressure on Jim Knowles. Again, he's making $2 million a year to be the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. Ryan Day brought him from an outside program to come in and fix the defense. If he doesn't do it, I don't think Pat Fitzgerald's going to be working this year, obviously, while he sorts out all the legal issues at Northwestern. But could Pat Fitzgerald be the next defensive coordinator at Ohio State for a power program? I think it would make some sense. Here's something crazy, though, about Pat Fitzgerald. He's never been a coordinator. He was linebackers coach and recruiting coordinator for 2 years at Northwestern before getting the head coaching job. So he has not been a defensive coordinator, but I'm pretty sure that Pat Fitzgerald could call a defense and be a defensive coordinator. So hear me out. Pat Fitzgerald's next job, working for Ryan Day at Ohio State.
I like it, Chad. You and Hutton both. We've kind of had that tie going around where Hutton had Ryan Day going to Chicago. I mean, this all started with Ed O to Northwestern. Well, a school that's not too far from Chicago is Notre Dame. And this is unconventional, but I even led off with saying that sometimes opposites attract. And right now, if you go to the NFL and you look at a team that probably has the most pressure, I'm just going to go ahead and give you a hot take here. The New York Jets are not making the playoffs this season. It's not going to happen. I don't care how much they put together right now. Robert Saleh, while I like him as a defensive assistant coach, I don't think he's cut out to be a head coach in the NFL. And so I have Robert Saleh going to Notre Dame. Now, there's also a lot more involved in this.
As what? Head coach?
Head coach. Jury's still out on Marcus Freeman. So we will see what can happen there. But
this would require Marcus Freeman getting canned after 2 seasons.
Stranger things have happened. But the other thing on top of this is we're uniting a country here, because if you look back at history, Catholics and Muslims haven't exactly had the best relationship. So we're mending that relationship throughout time. We're going to solve most of America's problems by doing this. The other thing I have to say is Notre Dame fans will love this, because the media will only talk about them. Now, you might be saying, Davey, they already do that. True, but at this time we have a different point we can look at and have a new spin to that angle. So right now, let's see here. Robert Saleh is 11-23, career record as a head coach. You can say, you know what, didn't have a whole lot when he got to New York. Having to deal with Zach Wilson, okay. But, hey, this is a prove-it year for him. I don't think it happens. And so, you know what, at the end of the day, opposites attract. It's boom or bust. I get that. I'm not going to argue, but we'll see what happens. I'm going with Robert Saleh to Notre Dame.
I'm buying Robert Saleh is going to get fired with the Jets. And if they don't make the playoffs, he's definitely getting fired with Aaron Rodgers this year. I don't see any universe, barring scandal, where Marcus Freeman's going to get fired after year 2 at Notre Dame. I just don't see that as a possibility.
I also don't see NFL
now there is
coaches,
a new AD coming in to Notre Dame.
Yes, yep. And he said he likes the independence of Notre Dame with the TV network, so that they're not moving from that. I
think I know where you're going, Hutton. NFL coaches making the move to college is going to be far less likely with everything going on in college.
Yes, with the overall
transfer
schedule,
portal,
free time,
the recruiting, the NIL part of it. They're going to be
if you
more
want
reluctant to do it.
Then give you the money, though. Notre Dame's up there.
They could pay. There's no doubt about that.
But if I'm making the move from Freeman, I've got to think I'm also going to hire a coach that knows the portal and the NIL space for recruitment purposes immediately from the jump.
We're strictly going entertainment here. Listen, Hard Knocks coming up. Robert Saleh's got a chance to display.
And
if he's got some charisma,
he was
doesn't want to do it.
to do it.
Yeah, well, too bad, buddy.
That's not a
Speaking
good.
of no leverage.
That's not a good sign for his entertainment quality that he's begging not to be on camera for Hard Knocks.
He was entertaining talking about Sauce Gardner last year. That's about it. He's got a great defense with what they've built in New York with the young players.
Do I have time?
Yeah, he's definitely going to be on the hot seat.
Do I have time to quickly give my pitch?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
For the week that I've been teasing all week, and I'm threatening everyone in studio that I'm going to make them watch the show and tell me if I'm insane or not for enjoying this program. There's a show, it was a podcast I listened to that turned me on to this, that I just gave it a chance, honestly going into it thinking, I'm probably going to hate this. But I watched it anyway. It's called Drops of God on Apple TV+. This is a show about the world of high-end wine. I am not a wine drinker. I know nothing about wine. But this show, this program, has got me wanting to be a sommelier, wanting me to smell wine, to look at it up against a white surface and see the different colors, to feel and taste the aromas with the wine. I'm telling you, this show is outstanding. It sounds like it's a reality show when I explain the premise. Essentially, the world's top wine person that has the richest private collection and knows more about wine than anyone on earth dies, and in his will, he has his daughter go up against his protege in a wine tasting contest to see who gets the inheritance of his private wine collection that's north of $180 million in value. It also gets his private home, everything. And it goes from there in this wine tasting contest. I never thought anything would make me want to drink wine, but this show has done it. It is a French and Japanese co-production.
I'm intrigued by this.
With Apple. So the common language is English. When they get together, they will speak English, the characters, but there's subtitles. A lot of the show takes place in France, and then a chateau in France, and then in Tokyo, Japan. So, highly recommend. Drops of God on Apple TV.
See, this makes me think of like
someone was saying
you
The
mentioned
Idol was
Sommelier.
going to be my show that I shockingly liked. I got through The Idol, and the conclusion of it made me hate ever watching a second of it.
Oh, I like your pitch here to watch this. I'm very intrigued. I'm also intrigued with just how someone like a sommelier is. You're basing this off of someone else's taste, right? That has gone on for generations.
Yeah.
So who determined that that person was the one we were going to base our quality of wine on at that time, and then it became what it was? Now,
this is less about
people are able to like name the age of the bottle.
This is less about like saying what's good and saying what it is.
Yes,
they can
and that
identify
is
everything about it.
Fascinating. Coming up, NCAA tournament expanding. When?
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I just think the way Anthony Bass handled this was so sloppy.
Oh, I think it's perfect.
And what he reposted, and then how he did it.
He bent the knee and bowed. He was going to catch the ceremonial first pitch.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
When you're behind closed doors, when you're talking to plant managers, when you're having meetings, when you're with the team, was there an acknowledgement of any of this, an acknowledgement of the situation, the boycott, and then the doubling down about moving away from the fratty image?
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human being. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it, people. I'm pissed off about this. I never did it before in my life, but Trump is being cheated. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
I believe this person is the greatest player anybody alive will ever see. How can you hate Derek Jeter? A guy's on-base percentage tells me his batting eye, and a guy's slugging percentage tells me if he's a threat. That's the kind of guy that throws a no-hitter, that effectively wild guy.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, a bold taste of a Southern legend.
Just like that, the final hour is here for Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow on this Thursday edition across the OutKick Network. Glad you're with us. Either listening to this great radio partner or streaming live at YouTube. Just by searching out OutKick, you can watch all the great shows across the OutKick Network there, live or on demand, including clips along the way. Chad, we have Ramon Diaz Jr. coming up in 20 minutes. He's a former football player at Northwestern who has come out and put his name behind the culture and the hazing, which he says he was hazed, and he will detail that with what he says are exactly how things were when he was with the program in 2005 to 2008 to where we are now with the story that Pat Fitzgerald has been fired. University's trying to fire him with cause, and the legal entanglements will certainly begin, and lawyers will make a ton of money off of this. A lot of questions to ask Ramon Diaz about, and we'll dive into that coming up in 20 minutes. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, respect to Ramon because he is the one person who's put his name on this report.
Yeah.
There's a lot of anonymous stories being told and people speaking anonymously to the student newspaper at Northwestern, to other publications. But to our knowledge, Ramon Diaz Jr. is the only one to put his name behind his allegations. So a lot of questions to get to with him for sure. A lot of people chiming in with questions they want us to ask him also. And I'm happy to get that feedback. And I'm asking some of them already that have been sent to us. So it's going to be a good conversation about early Pat Fitzgerald era Northwestern football, which he was there 05 to 08. So he was there for the previous coach. Fitzgerald takes over in 06 and had 3 years playing for Pat Fitzgerald.
Ramon Diaz Jr. joins us in 18 minutes. Chad, there's discussion about the NCAA tournament expansion, and this is going to happen. I'm not a fan of it. I don't know where you come down on this, but currently it's 68. They expanded in 2001 to 64 teams, I believe. Or no, it was 65.
65. There was one play-in game. Then they moved it to 68 with the first four.
And then that happened in 2011.
Yes.
And if you're just going based on the years, they're due to expand the tournament. It's not happening based on the committee that's looked into this. But they are, the men's basketball committee, they're considering many options for the future. Greg Sankey is a part of this discussion. They're going to expand this. I just hope they keep it at a number that allows us to see what we have seen in recent years with this tournament. And the fact that with the transfer portal the way it is now, Chad, it's compelling. It allows the Cinderellas are more likely to be competitive based on a sixth man at Georgia that transfers to Western Kentucky than they have been based on the way the rules are set up now. And I think it waters it down back to the way it was, where there was just no chance that a 16 seed was going to win. You weren't going to see a 15 seed or a 14 seed produce a compelling matchup. You would not see Florida Atlantic go all the way to the Final Four. We're seeing that now, and it's more expected that the first and second rounds of this tournament are going to be great. And I just don't think the first or second rounds of the tournament on an expanded tournament that includes, 128 teams, just to get to that 25% threshold, that's not great. It's a money grab, and they'll make a ton of it. But it's not great for the compelling sports fan where I want to sit down on that Thursday, Friday, and just binge what end up being some great moments of the year.
Well, and also, we are coming off this past NCAA tournament where the first and second rounds experienced the best ratings in the history of the sport for first and second round. So this does fall in line with if it ain't broke, don't fix it mantra. This is a tournament. We can point to things in college basketball that may be broken with some of the regular season stuff and things that can be improved. But it's difficult to argue with the NCAA tournament the way it is right now as the greatest single annual sporting event in America. I mean, from top to bottom, start to finish, the month-long tournament, single elimination. I think is the best single sporting event tournament every single year that we see across all sports. So I'm with you, Hutton. I don't want to see that system change. I will hear the arguments about if you're going to expand so many Division I teams and have more teams come into different leagues annually, well, if you're going to add 75 teams in Division I, then you should probably consider adding to the tournament field also, with more teams eligible for the tournament. I get that. I'm just looking at this from a very micro sense. And we can get into the macro of the sport, all right? But micro sense, that month is damn entertaining.
It's great.
And I do not want that bleeped with anytime soon. And if you get to 96 or whatever it is, we've got teams hosting other teams on their home. And then it just feels by the time you get, even if you got to through the preliminaries and got to that Thursday, Friday with 68, it already feels more watered down.
Yes.
But those week, the championship, the tournament weeks, the conference tournaments, and then the start of the NCAA tournament, it's a damn national holiday, that Thursday and Friday of the tournament. Like, I don't know why you'd want to mess with the specificity of that tournament with 68, first four, whatever. They added that. It doesn't really make a big difference. Mention the expansion to 65, then 68. But don't mess with that Thursday and Friday. Those are two of the best days of the sports calendar every single year, and I really don't want those messed with. If they wanted to do some preliminary thing where you got whatever, I think that you risk watering it down. That by the time you get to the 68, if you've already played 16, 20 tournament games, and they've been at home courts or whatever, I think you risk watering the whole product down.
This is the NCAA's moneymaker.
Yeah.
$1 billion a year plus off this tournament. In profit, and the vast majority is off this tournament. But if you're the NCAA and you believe, well, you're not in control of the college football playoff. If you believe that we're going to see the power conferences branch off and become their own entity at some point and govern themselves, the one thing you latch onto now and what you have to be discussing is how do we make sure that we keep the tournament the way it is on what we have control over. And if we're losing out on some college football aspects of a governing body, can we gain more control in the path that we're great in, which is that tournament? So not everyone's for it. CBS Sports did a poll last year. It was, they polled all of the 100 Division I head coaches. 97% of the feedback was they are wanting the tournament the way it is to remain the way it is. That's interesting.
That says a lot.
But it's also
because you would think that the coaches that aren't getting in as much with their programs, they want it expanded for that reason, so they can get in. But now 97%, that is an overwhelming majority.
Yeah, and I'm stunned by that because you poll 100 coaches, you're going to have the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots are going to say, yeah, we want part of the pie and part of the payout across college basketball. Payout for the Washington Commanders is a reported $6 billion to Daniel Snyder. There is a report through the Washington Post. They have this entire sale or potential sale totally covered. Wouldn't you guess that Snyder's, well, he's messing things up again. Issues in the legal negotiations between the NFL and representatives for Daniel Snyder threaten to complicate the approval and closing of Snyder's $6 billion sale of the franchise to Josh Harris and his ownership group. And this stems from talks that they're having. They're as early as next Thursday. The owners are hopeful, or have been hoping, that they can ratify this sale and it's approved and it's done. But Chad, a source with the Post says they describe the complication as significant and not just some small snag, because according to this source, the complications are related to, at least in part, legal issues pertaining to the leaking of emails that led to the resignation of John Gruden as head coach of the Raiders. And now owners are apparently not nearly as optimistic based on the way this has gone between the league and Snyder, because I don't think Harris wants to take on any of those legal issues through the franchise and inherit those. And I think Snyder's trying to leave it behind in the negotiations.
Can nothing be easy with Daniel Snyder?
Nothing.
I mean, nothing is simple. Even collecting $6 billion by selling the team cannot be easy with Daniel Snyder. And now the whole John Gruden thing coming back up, a story we talked about yesterday. It is crazy because all everyone wants is for this to be done, for competent ownership to be in Washington with that franchise. It's what Josh Harris wants, who's trying to buy the team. It's what the league wants. It's what Commanders fans want, is for this team to be out of his hands. And Daniel Snyder just can't make it easy. Anything involving him can't go smooth. Just won't happen.
And this was back in May, we were hearing that this deal was 95% done. Well, here's the 5%.
Yep.
And, of course, Snyder's behind it. Chad, Rory McIlroy saying no chance that he would ever play for the LIV Tour, for LIV Golf, saying he would just rather retire or just quit the game.
If it was the last golf league on earth, he would retire.
He would step away from the game. He goes, I would be totally fine just playing the majors, and that's it. I'd be totally comfortable stepping away from the game. Based on a report, and the report is sourcing one of the documents that was released through the United States Senate hearings that are taking place between and looking into the contract that's been agreed to between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf about the pitch to Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods of being team owners within LIV Golf. PGA Tour at the time, this was back in April, came back almost immediately, said no go. They're not going to be team owners. We're not negotiating that aspect of it. But Rory at the Scottish Open following his first round said he would rather retire if this was the last golf league on earth. But you say that key details here are the wording of this. LIV Golf, he wouldn't play for LIV Golf. But they're a part of this agreement, correct me if I'm wrong, is LIV Golf is in charge of coming up with this new entity, for which they don't have a name for it yet. And the PGA Tour and LIV Golf would be a part of that with its players.
Yeah, you're only not working for LIV Golf by title because you're still on the PGA Tour, but LIV Golf has a hand now on the PGA Tour and is a part owner in it. So I love that you're standing firm on your principles, Rory. All that sounds really cool and great, and I applaud you for it, but you're already working for LIV. So it doesn't really mean a hill of beans because you're already one of their employees.
I want further details on the meeting that took place last November, and then Rory's saying he met with the governor.
Yeah,
and
he didn't hide. He said I saw him late last year. I've played with him at a Pro-Am event also.
And he said he first met him at an F1 race.
Yeah, he said that he's very influential and he's always been around the golf world. He said we know a lot of the same people. So I didn't hear a lot of personal issues with Al Ramayan, right? The way he was describing that.
Yeah.
But obviously he has issues with where this money comes from. So, and the Saudi government. I hear Rory say that, and I would love it if someone actually went through with this and said, hey, after this happened, I'm retiring from golf. I'm not playing again. It hasn't happened yet, and Rory threatening it sounds great, but he's already pretty much with LIV. So it doesn't mean much.
Everyone is now.
Yeah. And he's never going to be on the LIV Tour because what LIV wants is the PGA name. They want to run PGA. They don't want to run LIV forever. They created LIV to get the foot in the door to barrel through the door because the door would not be cracked open by PGA. They wanted nothing to do with them. So they forced their hand by creating LIV. So now they want PGA. And they're probably not going to stop until they're the controlling owners of the PGA Tour.
And a part of this was they would also have to appear in 10 LIV events.
Yeah.
As part of being gifted the ownership of teams. And, they would try to have this massive superstar top golf players in the world tournament, a global event, which the PGA Tour has said they're going to attack the sport globally. This will certainly do that on the PGA Tour schedule. We're seeing the sovereign wealth funds investment in sports. We've detailed it in F1. They're tennis now,
soccer,
of course, golf, soccer. And in some cases, you can find it in many leagues. For instance, the Washington Wizards, reading up, and the Capitals, I believe, they have a percentage. The sovereign wealth fund has invested a percentage to get like a 5% stake in those franchises, for instance. Now, they don't have controlling ownership, and that's what Adam Silver was recently discussing for the NBA as commissioner, where he said there's no pathway in the foreseeable future for sovereign wealth funds to become the controlling owners of an NBA franchise. And the wording here is also important because he didn't say ever, he just said for the foreseeable future. I don't want to say that could ever happen, but there's no contemplation right now. I mean, it's very important to us, putting aside sovereign wealth funds, that individuals are in a position to control our teams, be responsible to the fans, be responsible to the partners and to the players. And it's very important to us that there would be a person in charge, and this is independent of sovereign wealth funds. So he's pointing to the controlling owner having a face and a singular voice, but there are plenty of ownership teams where you have the front man for the rock band that is the billionaire, and then a bunch of millionaires with you. And in this case, it's not that hard to foresee an NBA franchise that would have that person that would be put in place by the sovereign wealth fund.
The new Seattle Supersonics, when they're an expansion team, could have their Mick Jagger up front and their Keith Richards in the back, and Keith Richards could be the private investment fund. That's possibly a scenario that will take place.
Also consider this, like in Major League Baseball, they want expansion. Got to find those billionaires.
Yep.
Not everyone's looking to jump in. Ramon Diaz Jr., former Northwestern player, joins us next.
What is your primary complaint when people pop their knuckles?
Primary complaint is chewing with your mouth open. Yuck.
I would say when you're getting off an airplane and people in the back try and sprint to the front, especially like late at night, like you don't have a connecting flight, just wait like everybody else. I'd say that's fine.
Small portions, big bill. Yeah, if the quality's good, it's okay. But if there's small portions and I got a big fat bill, not a thing, you know.
Sun Country Airlines canceling our flight less than 8 hours before we're supposed to leave.
I've never even heard of Sun Country Airlines in my life.
Velcro.
Velcro? Why? What about it?
The sound.
Oh, like nails on a chalkboard for you.
I'm a kindergarten teacher, and to hear that Velcro.
Time to teach them how to tie their shoes.
When they don't cross the road when no cars are driving.
They're just waiting for the light?
Yeah, like a normal person.
Yeah, you got to break the rules a little bit.
We're right from New York City. We know how to walk.
Really upset. Ben Jones is no longer with the Titans, but more importantly, I'm upset the Titans didn't draft a wide receiver in the top 2 rounds. We need receivers, guys. Come on, tighten up.
So what do you think about Will Levis? Was that a good move or a bad move?
Ooh, that's a tough call. Time will tell. But I think we needed a receiver more.
Smack their gum. Chew with their mouth open and smack their gum.
Okay.
That with chips and everything else, yeah.
Liars.
Liars. Okay. Has anyone lied to you recently?
No.
Have you lied?
Always.
One of the biggest pet peeves is not knowing your manners. Like, not having respect or thank you, sir, ma'am.
My biggest pet peeve is when you don't push your chair in after you leave a table. That's my biggest pet peeve. Really is.
So like when people want to speak to you and they're like you to me, but they start walking out of the other room into different rooms and they keep talking like, I am supposed to understand. I can't hardly understand people when their back is turned to me and when they're not talking right at me. So when you're getting into different rooms and you keep talking like, yeah, blah, 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 it must be my dog talking to me.
There's a crane over every building. There's a truck.
There's a hole, something. Yeah. So let's get the streets fixed and get those things done. Time's wasted. Let's go.
A dirty house.
Dirty house. Like, are you a shoes off at the front door kind of guy?
Front, yes, ma'am.
I hate it when centre backs don't bat the odd one. Do you know,
What?
when the centre backs go up to try and catch the ball all the time, they should bat the odd one.
You know, siblings are pet peeves, you know, to be honest with you. You know, just looking at him, he's a pet peeve.
I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I like to get along with others. I kind of leave people in their place. When people don't follow the social construct, it really upsets me. Example, when you stand up on an airplane, right when it lands, and then try to push past people down the line. You know what orders you're supposed to go in. That's the part of the social contract. When you're grocery shopping and you have your cart and you don't take it back to the cart delivery spot, but you just leave it there beside the parking spot, taking up someone else's spot, violating the social contract. Do what you're supposed to. Yeah, do your civic duty. Follow through with what your parents told you to do.
Glad you're with us for Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow here across the OutKick network. And the story that has dominated the week, and going into the last weekend too, Chad, Northwestern, the hazing allegations and the hazing culture.
That 2-week suspension
initially
3 days
was
later
became
became a firing of
firing
Pat Fitzgerald.
of Mr. Northwestern Wildcat Pat Fitzgerald.
6-month-long investigation, 50-plus people interviewed by the investigator. A lot of news coming out of this one story at Northwestern.
Yeah, and plenty of questions that we've been going back and forth with all week. And we're pleased to be joined by former Northwestern offensive lineman Ramon Diaz Jr., who played at Northwestern from, was it 2005 or 2004, Ramon, when you started?
05 to 09.
05 to 09. So and by the way, thank you for joining us. Why is right now the time for you to put your name and face and voice behind what has been a culture at Northwestern that you describe as systematically toxic, but you also say that you loved your time at Northwestern and you loved being a Wildcat?
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks for having me. Really appreciate just allowing you all to reserve some space for me to be able to share my story. I do appreciate it. Yeah, I think that question's been posed to me by several different reporters, and I think it's an important one. I think that, I think that's been kind of the critique, I guess, at this point is, why wait till right now? You could have said anything. You could have said things before. This has been so long. And I think, to be fair, for me, I do have quite a bit of language around what has happened now, just because of now being a clinical therapist, and I'm working on a PhD in neuropsychology. One of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing today is because of all the things that I had to endure leaving the program. And I also had just to work through some really, really difficult psychological issues that I had no idea that I was suffering. And so now, as I've spent a lot of time reflecting, what I remind reporters now is that the difficulty of trying to explain something when you're in a place that's an environment that's systemically driven by oppressing any kind of narrative or dissenting opinion, especially for a person of color. Unless you've been in an environment like that. I work with patients that deal with this kind of oppression often, and I know that it often doesn't come, the narrative or the sharing of the trauma experience, until years later, sometimes, if it ever comes out. And so people can either believe that or not. I mean, I'm not here to prove a case. And I felt very, very much motivated to share, to also defend those two whistleblowers that first initially came out on Friday, and then I felt compelled after the alleged letter that was written by in all caps, the alleged Northwestern football team, which when, especially, I felt like somebody was speaking on my behalf, and I did not feel that way. And I felt now I have the training and the skills and also the ability to speak against that. And I felt like I needed to share my name as well, because I had nothing to hide. So it's not like there's no facts that people can look at and undermine once I share my story.
And I know you confirmed a lot of the hazing allegations, saying that was going on in your time there, and also talked about a racist climate within the program with some of the things said to you. If you would, Ramon, can you give a couple of specific examples? I know you've laid this out that I've seen in print to reporters, but one thing that happened to you where you would say this was an example of a racist atmosphere within the program, and also one specific example of either what you endured or what you saw from a hazing standpoint during your time in Evanston.
Sure. I can answer two specific situations. One of the reasons I do want to make it a point that, you know, what I endured, as well as watching one of my who's one of the players that came out, he still remains anonymous. I have encouraged him since Friday to share his name, and I'll let him decide to do that. We've been talking about what happened in that position room since we both graduated up until this point, in various contexts, personally behind closed doors. And so we both never thought we'd ever have the opportunity to share what actually occurred to both of us. And he's reported this in a WGN interview as well, so you can probably find it online at this point. And so for me, it was, as a redshirt freshman, to be put in a room with the rest of the team, and then to have your head shaved in front of everybody, in front of all the players. I want to be clear about that. This is the players. I do not believe any of the coaches were involved for the shaving of my head. And to have Cinco de Mayo shaved on the back of my head, and then having to have that shaved in my head for several days, and then we were able to shave it off afterwards. We had to walk around like that. And so the first point I'll make is that you could have shaved anything in my head. Not that I condone the behavior, but you could have shaved anything, and why that? Why did people believe that would be funny? My parents came here. I'm the only natural born citizen of my family. My parents, neither of them could speak English. They came here, and it was a very painful experience, which I don't feel obliged at all to disclose what they went through. But they came here out of fear in the 80s, and for me to have that put on my head, I still, to this day, my parents still don't know what had happened. My mother actually messaged me Saturday night and said, "I saw you in the news. What happened?" And even to this day, because there's so many things that she's not aware of, I won't tell her, because I don't know she would be appalled, and she would be so hurt by what one person could do to another person just purely on their race. And the second thing that happened was to my Black teammate, who's a very close friend of mine. We were the only two people of color in this offensive line group during the years, and there was one player, but he was a little older, and he ended up graduating soon after I arrived, so I didn't really know him that well. But him and I, the Black teammates my age, there were very specific comments that were made by the position coach, who's a white position coach. And then there was a second coach that would often be in the room that was when the comment was made. But there would be several comments around what he wore. One specific comment that still stands out to me is the way my teammate dressed doesn't fit the norms of this very oppressive environment. So he would often say, we're not in the hood anymore. Please, stop wearing that stuff. And again, I'm not quoting him specifically, but just paraphrasing, of course. And then there would be other things, like they would mimic the way he walks, almost imitating like a monkey. And unless you're there and you saw it, and to feel like I only could look at him and neither of us laughed, but to know, like, if we say anything, it could probably, I don't think we would get injured, but it would be more of we would be laughed at and we would be gaslit. I mean, I have a language again around this now, but a lot of gaslighting, a lot of psychological intimidation, and then to have the person who you're supposed to respect and play for, because I was a highly recruited athlete coming out of high school, to play for somebody who was doing this to me, and a very good friend of mine. I've never been under that kind of environment. There was a specific comment that was made by another white offensive lineman in a different setting, where we were on a practice field and jokes were being made. At some point, he looks over to my black teammate and say, "Hey, do that monkey, dance that you know how to do." And again, why reference that? Why reference a monkey? I never thought in the 21st century I would be at a prestigious university like Northwestern. I chose this school among many. I had a lot of choices to choose from to play at, and to hear that about one of my best, I would say my best friend. There's a reason why we're still talking about it today behind closed doors.
Ramon Diaz Jr., former Northwestern offensive lineman, with us on Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow. Was this just an offensive lineman room thing, or was it further throughout the locker room?
Are you referring to just the racist comments or the environment?
And the hazing.
Or the hazing as well. That I'm hearing what you're saying. Every story is the offensive line room with the position group that you were playing with. I'm curious how obvious it was versus something that people would just assume was average run-of-the-mill hazing versus what's been reported, which is very sexual in nature based on what has been out there this week.
Yeah, so I do confirm the car wash that did happen. I've never been around a situation like that where I've had to come alongside other men nude and rub up against them, where their genitals are out, my genitals are out. I've never had to experience anything like that. Having 3 children of my own now, if I found out that my son had to go through something like that, the school would not want to hear from me, because it's not going to be good. Obviously as a neuropsychologist in training, like, I wouldn't leave the school until I had the coach in the office, the AD, superintendent, and I would demand accountability. And that would just me as a parent now, in hindsight. So I couldn't even begin to imagine if parents knew what were happening. And so that's one. The other point was that I made in reporting is again, it was always under the guise of team bonding. I think that's what I'm sure that's many who defend the athletic program would say that. But I saw many upperclassmen urinate on lowerclassmen. I've never seen anything like that. I've never been. I mean, we're not perfect as athletes. I'm not suggesting that I've never made mistakes. I'm not saying that, but we all kind of crack jokes, and I think that's part of the sport experience that we've all had, most of us. But to see that and happen, to see that, me witness that, I think is something as a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, and now as a therapist, like, there's a reason why people don't speak up when you're in that kind of environment, and it seems like it's being condoned by everybody in the shower, and no one is saying anything. I just wanted to play football, as I tell reporters. I was so excited to play for such a great academic institution, being the first person in my family to have a college degree, and to be able to make my family proud. And that was the only goal of me going to college, was to one day hopefully help provide financially for my family, and to have to endure those kind of things. And I think the other point, to answer his question specifically, I know that there's one time I was walking out to practice, and I had another black teammate from a different position group say, and I'm censoring here just for the sake of the report, and obviously we're live, and your viewers probably don't want to hear me share the exact wording, but basically he said, I don't know why he treats you so bad, but he used different choice words, and he was referring to my position coach. And so there is evidence to suggest that other people could see it pretty clearly. I know that there was other things that my black teammate had to endure at parties, where he would attend parties with these offensive linemen. I refused to go any parties with them. I didn't attend any parties where any of my white teammates were, because that's how I felt, how marginalized and how alienated I felt. I've mentioned this to reporters as well, that the last 2 years that I was there, just like in high school, many players, they get together before games, usually have like a film night, or and so Northwestern would have the quarterback and the linemen get together for kind of a steak dinner or something. And I never attended any of those my last 2 years. That's how uncomfortable I felt around them. And the quarterback would always be there. So no one cared to call me. No one cared to ask where I was. I think everyone knew. I didn't have to explain myself, but I also didn't feel like I needed to explain myself. So I think that was the way I exited, was not feeling like I was really participating at all. I just was there eventually to graduate.
Ramon Diaz has been our guest, former Northwestern offensive lineman. We've got a break here, and hopefully as more details emerge, we can continue the conversation as well. Hopefully you'll be able to join us again, Ramon, and we can dive deeper on some of this.
Thanks for coming on and telling your story to us, Ramon. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
It's Ramon Diaz. We'll give thoughts on what we heard.
Lots to unpack.
No doubt. We'll do that next here on Hot Mic.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into OutKick, the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I just think the way Anthony Bass handled this was so sloppy.
Oh, I think it's perfect.
And what he reposted,
he bent the knee and bowed. He was going to catch the ceremonial first pitch.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
When you're behind closed doors, when you're talking to plant managers, when you're having meetings, when you're with the team, was there an acknowledgement of any of this, an acknowledgement of the situation, the boycott, and then the doubling down about moving away from the fratty image?
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human being. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it, people. I'm pissed off about this. I never did it before in my life, but Trump is being cheated. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
I believe this person is the greatest player
anybody alive will ever see. How can you hate Derek Jeter? A guy's on-base percentage tells me his batting eye, and a guy's slugging percentage tells me if he's a threat. That's the kind of guy that throws a no-hitter, that effectively wild guy.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Old taste of a Southern legend.
Six, the Peabody location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Our thanks to all the guests that joined us throughout the show today. Ramon Diaz Jr., former Northwestern offensive lineman, the previous segment. If you missed portion of that, you can check it out on YouTube on demand.
A lot to unpack here.
And we certainly need more time. We'll get him back on because there's follow-ups to things.
Well, the one follow-up I want to get to that could have had a quick answer was Randy Walker, who tragically died of a heart attack, was the guy he went to play for, right? He committed to Randy Walker at Northwestern. He had him there for a year. He started as a redshirt freshman.
Right, and he referenced
playing.
that.
So, like, what was this systemic under Randy Walker's program that Pat Fitzgerald inherited and it continued, or did it start anew with Pat Fitzgerald? I wanted to ask that question.
When he was
to clarify.
discussing what the head shaving story, he mentioned that was his redshirt freshman year.
Yeah.
That would have been 2005.
And Hunt, you brought up a great question based on the head shaving incident.
Well, because he stressed, he's like, and I want to be clear, it's the players in that room, not coaches.
Yeah, he said there was not a coach present.
But if you've got that, again, we need to chat further. If you have that shaving in your head and you're walking around with it for 3 or 4 days, coaches are going to see that, right?
Yeah.
Even as a red shirt.
I'm hard-pressed to believe that not one coach
unless he just wears a hat everywhere,
would see that and not say,
yeah,
let's shave the rest of that off. Come on, guys. This is stupid.
It's that the hazing that I read about that he's referencing there, I mean, there's hazing for fraternity initiation.
Yeah, there's hazing
as you're
everywhere.
a pledge, but it's not I never went through anything close to something like that. Never saw
it's not this, homoerotic with the stuff that's going on.
Right.
Like this is sexual assault. I mean, when you're talking about forcing someone to rub genitals with someone or rub them on them with a car wash he described and everything else is crazy. Royce in our YouTube chat says, this kid is a prime example of the problem in the United States. Can't stand listening to sensitive dudes that couldn't stand a middle school locker room in the 90s. Sorry. It also says the only part of this interview that showed racism at all was his action toward his white teammates. This is usually what happens when you get these finger pointers. Look, man, I mean, this is above and beyond middle school hazing in the 90s. I was in a middle school locker room in the 90s. I was not being forced to do a nude center quarterback exchange or going through a car wash where dudes, sensitive pieces, are flying all over the place and hitting me. Like this is next level stuff. I'm not claiming that this hasn't happened anywhere else and that this is completely exclusive to Northwestern. But this is weird. If you can't acknowledge it's weird, and I would acknowledge, like Ramon did, that if my son were forced to participate in this, I would have issues with it.
Yeah.
To this level. Like I understand some good-natured ribbing or you're having to do something for upperclassmen, right? Carrying their equipment, getting them meals, whatever it is. Like that's part of the process.
Yeah.
But this is not. This is silly.
And
all this stuff is silly.
Yeah, I mean, the hazing, getting tied to a goalpost and baby powder and all that stuff. I mean, that was going on up until 5 or 10 years ago now across the league in every training camp of all 32 teams.
Yeah.
So there's a massive jump from the stories that we've all seen or have been told or have witnessed or have referenced to the allegations that turned into reports that turn into players that are validating stories, and then Ramon's coming forward and saying, "Now I'll speak on it."
Well, the stories of the racism, the racist climate he talked about with the Cinco de Mayo being shaved into his head. There's another thing that he didn't get into, but that at some point apparently his position coach said to him that I thought you'd be better at cleaning houses, given who your parents are.
Wow.
You know, like, okay, that's really bad.
Yeah.
I want to make it clear because this whole story centers around Pat Fitzgerald. He didn't reference Pat Fitzgerald's name one time. Pat Fitzgerald would have been on the defensive side of the ball, not the offensive side of the ball.
His first year
You know,
there.
Hutton, you asked a good question about, was this just the offensive line room or was it other rooms? He mentioned a player on the defensive side saying something to him. I've read multiple stories with his quotes in it. He does reference a story with a defensive back who complained about being forced to cut his hair and that white players with long hair were not forced to cut their hair, and that he said something to him about it. So I do think it's pretty widespread, but I also think to be responsible, we should say there's not one story yet from him of, and Pat Fitzgerald was right there watching it as the head coach or condoning it.
Well,
and that's been Pat Fitzgerald's defense, right? Is I didn't know.
And Northwestern has admitted they don't have that information.
They don't have proof that he knew about it, and that's why he got a 2-week suspension in the middle of the summer. Then they come back and say, "No, you're fired," which is, Northwestern perspective again. I feel like they could have just gotten through this and taken the PR hit initially, and it would have eventually blown over. But now they fired him. And we knew, look, Ramon was going to come out and talk about this, whether he was fired or not, possibly, right? And it would have been a storyline for a bit, but I think they could have weathered this storm. Whether that's the right decision or the wrong decision, they could have weathered the storm. They clearly wanted to keep their coach. Clearly.
Yeah.
And now they fired him, and all these other allegations are coming out. It's a crazy situation.
And now it turns into a legal battle.
Yeah.
Or will.
Over $41 million he's owed.
Okay,
He's 2 years into a 10-year contract. He got Northwestern, I'm talking about Pat Fitzgerald, to the Big Ten championship game in the COVID year of 2020. He got a 10-year deal. Based off of that, he's 2 years into that. He is owed $41 million on his contract. That's going to be a big-time legal fight.
You agree with Trey earlier that the fact that the assistant coaches were retained, kept on board, that helps his case of being fired without cause instead of with cause, he would be able to get paid that money?
Yeah, I think it helps his cause. It also diminishes the severity that Northwestern is acting like is going on with this case, right? Because you fire your coach. It reached the point of it's so bad we got to fire our coach who's been here for 17 years and is a grad. But it's not bad enough that people that may have been a part of it or condoned it have to leave also, because we have to have a football season, guys. We got to play football this year. We can't fire everyone. They got to stay here and coach football. What a weird purgatory year this is for Northwestern, and those coaches included. Those coaches know they're gone.
Yes.
This dude just left North Dakota State to be the defensive coordinator at Northwestern, and now he's going to be the head coach. And he's auditioning not for Northwestern, for a job at FCS level.
Or maybe he is if he wins 3 or 4 games.
But a staff that he doesn't know, that he came in and just got to know in January, like he's not been around them that long. Everyone on staff.
Well, that's why they chose him.
There's basically a mutiny probably happening right now. They're Pat Fitzgerald guys that know they're going to get fired.
That are under contract.
Because they were under Pat Fitzgerald. But they're only there now because they got to have a football season.
Yeah, and they've got to retain recruiting classes and anything else that they care about at Northwestern for the program. The question is, how much do they care about the football program there? Because they had a guy that was not going to leave, right? He's a lifer.
The nerds at Northwestern are going to love this story.
Wildcat.
They can get back to petitioning that $800 million stadium.
We say they've got an interim that has no chance, but again, it comes down to there's a zero expectation gig.
Yeah,
it's a great launching point for a young coordinator across the country to get that gig. And the same could be said about the defensive coordinator who's inheriting this job opportunity. But still, the vast majority of the roster reports are very upset about all this. With their coach
well,
being
and they had that big
fired.
joint statement also defending Pat Fitzgerald and the culture at Northwestern. Some of the stuff that he's talking about from the racism standpoint doesn't really surprise me, because it's very similar. I referenced this to start the show to Iowa, to the strength coach at Iowa. It's a lot of the same stuff. Like, hey, cut your hair. You're not in the hood anymore. We don't do things like that around here. That's not our culture. Kind of coded like, hey, be more like the white players, type stuff. That's the feeling that the black players on these teams get. By the way, I do want to reference this. Amado Villarreal was a kicker, and he was an honorable mention All Big Ten at Northwestern. He saw that who we were having on today, and
Ramon.
Ramon, and he sent me a private message on Twitter, and he just said, per your recent tweet, as a Latino walk-on kicker who played during the same time on the Northwestern football team as your upcoming guest, my experience was not the same. It was a very positive experience. I did not experience the purported racist and toxic culture that is being portrayed. I have invited Amado to join the show to give his perspective. Now, important to note, Amado's a kicker. Okay?
Not an offensive lineman.
The special teams room and the kickers probably weren't hazed at any point, so he's not in the offensive line room. And he's also not saying that Ramon is lying. He's just saying my experience as a Latino kicker was not like his, right? It was not a negative experience, and he didn't see any of the racism. So then we dive into the big question, Hutton, of is this an offensive line coach problem, an offensive line room
Position
problem,
only.
or could they have just saved a lot of this by going back and saying they had a culture problem on the offensive line? Or is it, Pat Fitzgerald that should be fired? There's a lot of layers to this.
But think about it it's not just the offensive lineman from the 2005 to 2008 era. These reports, one of the anonymous former players was a player as recent as 2021-22. And the turnover with coaching staffs, and you would think based on what Ramon was saying, he's certainly been a part of this investigation, or certainly someone you want to talk to.
Well, another question.
If it's the offensive line coach, they wouldn't retain that guy.
If we weren't forced into a break, another question we could have asked him was, were you contacted by the investigation? There were 50-plus people contacted, player and staffers, and that seems like a pretty important guy to talk to. With his story that he told us, right?
Yes.
If you're doing an investigation.
And he said he was motivated, though, to come forward and put his face and name and voice to it based on the Daily Northwestern investigation with the anonymous players. But also, the jump from 2 weeks to fired with cause and the short amount of time in which that took place. I know Schill, the president, he met with the board of directors for the university, teacher, faculty,
by the way,
players.
Schill and the AD did go face-to-face with the players on Tuesday night.
They
We
did?
talked about that. They did the Zoom thing, and all the players were upset and had a bunch of tweets came out about, if you're going to do this, have the courage to at least let us ask questions.
Yeah.
Don't do a written Zoom announcement and then hang up on the Zoom. They did go and meet with the players on campus, and they had a Q&A session after
In response
on
to
Tuesday night.
That backlash?
Well, they were on vacation. I think the president
This
was
is
actually not there, and he was on Zoom, and then they came back Tuesday night because of the backlash to meet with the team. And the AD was present as well.
Chad, good news from the All-Star game and Home Run Derby. The kid that took that 100-mile-per-hour baseball off his head, he was one of the guys, or one of the kids in the outfield when you had Vladimir Guerrero Jr. just mashing. Take a line drive off the face, and by all accounts, TMZ gave an update, said he's fine. Clean bill of health.
It's tough. I always think about that when those little kids are out there running around, because they're all focused on one fly ball and running after it together.
And the hits are happening.
And then the hits are coming fast and furious. You better keep your head on a swivel when you're out there in the outfield.
He said left the bat at 115 miles per hour. What was the?
Might make some kids think twice before signing up when they get offered to go out there.
I don't
in the
know how it
outfield
doesn't
to
happen
shag
more often.
balls.
You know,
I know.
What was the mile per hour that you had to hit to reach a certain?
According to Eduardo Perez,
Okay.
it was 108. They said 108 is the exit velo to get to 440. I have no idea how you calculate that, but he was saying that that's where they need to be around. It was 104 or 108, but to reach that bonus level of the long home run, to get there, they needed 108.
This hit would have had that velocity. You know, I don't know how he didn't suffer.
You're
big
right,
time
though.
Injury.
There, but for the grace of God, that this hasn't happened more
I know.
times with more kids in the outfield.
Especially with the time limits, you know, the clock. You're trying to get as many
Well, and the
swings as you
absolute
can.
just laser beams these guys are hitting too.
Yes. We're back at it tomorrow. Join Chad and Armando for Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow right here on the OutKick Network, 3 o'clock Eastern.